Good morning. It is 5:34. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is the Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. Good morning once again. It is April 1st, the fourth month of the year. I mean, I know you know that, but when you put it in that perspective, wow, what a surprising year it's been. Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. It's 40 degrees, going to get up to 54 today. Overcast, a 0% chance of rain, and I'm sure you're all happy about that. Let's take a look at some of the headlines this morning. We've got right here in New Rochelle 3 cases in well-known nursing homes that are confirmed. 1 over at United Hebrew, 2 over at Willow Towers. New York deaths are up to 1,550, and there are some issues even about having now clogged up funeral parlors, believe it or not. Westchester deaths are up to 25, including 3. Again, those 3 here in New Rochelle where we have confirmed cases, but they're not dead, thank goodness. And if you look at the numbers, Yonkers has 608, New Rochelle 378, and Mount Vernon 269 new cases. That's what we're up to. Let me get it right. All right, let's take a look at the weather. All right, the weather for this April 1st. No April Fool's jokes today, at least not until we get some of the guests on. It's Wednesday, April 1st, 2020, 40 degrees right now, getting up to 54. Sun and clouds, 0% chance of rain. A mix of sun and clouds, but we'll take it. Tonight, partly cloudy, getting up to 37. Thursday, increasing clouds after some sunshine, but mostly cloudy. About 55 during the day. At night, getting down to 42. Friday, yes, a little bit of rain early, but then that goes away and into a 55-degree, reasonably nice day. Partly sunny on Saturday, getting up to 54. And the weather, as always, here on Radio Westchester, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit UHGC.com. Let's get into some of those stories now. We're actually going to go to the national level so that we can work our way back to the local stories, because this is a story that affects everyone, and the virus knows no borders. President Trump issued a grim warning to Americans yesterday, saying the nation should expect a spike in deaths in the coming weeks from the coronavirus pandemic before the tragic situation starts to improve. This is going to be a tough 2 weeks, he said, from the White House during the daily briefing. As a nation, we face a difficult few weeks as we approach that really important day when we will see things get better. All of us, all of a sudden, and it will be like a first light. That's the way the president did put it. But that seems to be the agreed upon situation, that over the next 2 weeks, they do expect this problem to peak, and the question is, how long will that peak? If it indeed does peak, how long will it take to flatten out? And then how long will those numbers begin to come down where experts and government organizations feel it's safe to come or go back to work, as the case may be? So now there are a number of organizations that are really feeling the pinch. EMS workers are really feeling the pinch. Hospitals are. The need for respirators, the need for hospital beds. This is, we're about to go through, according to everyone, the worst of it. Right here at home, if we take a look at New York deaths, 1,550, and wow. That is just troubling, but it is what it is. Now, in New York City, there are 41,771 cases, 1,096 deaths. So it's, wow, that's a large percentage than I would like. But the more the numbers go up, the lower percentages will go. In New York State, 75,795. Again, the 1,550 deaths that we mentioned to you. And in the United States, total 186,3,800 deaths. And those, they tell us, are small numbers compared to what we will see over the next 2 weeks. And of course, the local story we have to share with you. Don't enjoy doing it right here in New Rochelle nursing homes. And we reported the first one, the one at United Hebrew, about 4, 5, 6 days ago. And they still remain at one, and that always is a concern if it gets inside a nursing home. These generally are the most vulnerable among us. Also now 2 reported at Willow Towers, both nursing homes down on Pelham Road, and which has a string of nursing homes here in New Rochelle. Full disclosure, United Hebrew is sponsor here at Radio Westchester. Now, Westchester deaths are up to 25, and here's how the major cities stack up. Just some of the major cities, and consistent for the most part with density, numbers and density of population. Yonkers, there are already 608, and yet they weren't in the news. Somehow they escaped New Rochelle, or being in the top of the news, yet they've got the biggest number, but they have the most people. New Rochelle, 378. Yonkers, again, 608. New Rochelle, 378. Mount Vernon, 269. White Plains, 170. Greenberg, 149. Yonkers has 105, not Yonkers, I'm sorry, Yorktown has 105, Cortland 99, and so on. That's pretty much the way it goes. For the other local areas, Eastchester, 76, Scarsdale, 71. Mount Kisco, where the governor himself lives, 58. So that is the status of the virus as we speak. In New Rochelle, one group of people, in fact, they are the people who had the virus or tested positive here in New Rochelle that led to the original quarantine that emanated out of the Young Israel Synagogue. Talk about giving back. Members of the Young Israel congregation who tested positive began donating their blood at the synagogue. Professionals came to do that to see if they have enough or the kinds of antibodies to fight off infection. These samples will be studied in an effort to develop COVID treatment. And there were some nice photos of people there, middle-aged, young people wanting to help. And just a very nice thing. And we thank those people in New Rochelle of the Young Israel congregation for what they're doing. Well, you've got the kids at home, and right now they're undergoing their, well, or most of them probably are, the tootling at home, or did I say tootling? Tutoring at home, and learning over the web. Well, that's going to continue. There will be, the state has mandated there will be no spring break, and that they will allow for remote learning throughout that period, hopefully in an effort to give the kids something to do, but primarily so that whatever we're losing during the crisis in terms of the quality and efficacy of education, that will be supplemented by the continued learning during the break. It is 6:43. Now, the governor kind of apologized for unemployment problems. Unemployment people naturally deluged the site, and some not able to get through, others not able to get their unemployment application done. The governor apologized and said steps are being taken to speed up the process. Now, something related to pay. Those of you who work for New York State were getting a surprise this week. You were supposed to be paid, I think it was Friday or Monday. Well, you've not been paid yet, or at least half of you haven't. And that has less to do with the COVID crisis than it does to do with the usual negotiations and holdups and delays, et cetera, as a result of the budget. So they've yet to pass it. And so some people have seen their paychecks delayed by a few days. And I don't know that we've heard anybody apologize for that. The usual dance between the governor and the legislature is taking place over who to blame. But those checks should be on their way pretty much directly, if not already. Meanwhile, those of you who are looking forward to, if you were, the legalization of marijuana, that is not going to make it this year again. You can combine the usual budget dance with the trouble and the hesitation that's been developed because of the virus. So you will not see the legalization of marijuana in New York in 2020. Now, every once in a while, something positive comes out of it. Well, I don't know that this is positive. Many people buy special passes to go over the Cuomo Bridge. Well, you can get a credit if you have the kinds of passes that were trip-related and that would otherwise expire. You can call Easy Pass. Go ahead and do that and get credits for unused trips. So, because some of these things had time frames on them. I've never had that kind of an Easy Pass, but those of you who do know what they are, please do go and get your credit. It isn't often that credits get offered by our government. It is 6:45. Italy has some interesting problems today because at least 50 doctors have died from COVID. 50 doctors while trying to help the sick because they were sent into war without essential protective gear. And we hear some of that even now. Italy's National Federation of Orders of Surgeons and Dentists released a list of names of the dead doctors. So those are the kinds of things that we don't want to have happen here, but that we will keep in mind. Now, a story I set aside before we give you another look at the weather that really troubled me lately. We're going to talk about the budget again when we come back from break. But you all recall we did this story, I guess we did it on Monday. And it was troubling because no one knows why a man decided to start a fire in the subway that led to the death of a motorman and that led to the death of another train operator who helped to evacuate people from the train. Well, listen to this. I get no pleasure in doing this story, but we as a society need to figure out how this happens. Police are questioning, and this came out of the Post yesterday, questioning a person, of interest in the tragic subway fire that killed an MTA motorman and injured 16 others. Sources identified the man as Nathaniel Avinger and said he also is being questioned about a March 11 fire on 125th Street. Now, this isn't a surprise, but it still is a shock. They are different. Avinger has 39 prior arrests, including a March 19, which isn't all that long ago, according to my calendar, bust for damaging property, and a March 6 arrest for criminal mischief. His prior record includes arrests for 6 assaults, 6 robberies dating to 87. Law enforcement sources did share that with the Post. Someone, and I wish this came before I may even call Duffy up anyway. Why is a guy like this on the street? If you or I did that, well, no, let me just put it more simply. It pays to have a lot of arrests because then it's just another drop in a bucket of crime. And it is just, we're going to keep letting people like that go. Now, someone who has several arrests, there ought to be something written in the law. Maybe they're not murder, maybe they're not grand larceny, but it's X numbers of arrests, and even though there may be a lot of convictions, anyone with common sense is going to say, I need to keep this guy off the street. And in that case, go ahead and build more jails. Make me more conservative. Take this liberal and make me look at this and say, lock him up. And that's never been my tone. But we cannot continue to have these kinds of crimes committed by people who keep committing crimes and pretend that it doesn't exist. There's got to be a better way. All righty. Also, one more story, and then I promise we get to the weather again, and we will. Please excuse me. It's not the virus. I turned off the mic. More than 100 homeless have tested positive for the coronavirus in New York City. Now, if you think there are only 100 people with the virus in the homeless population, I've got a bridge to sell you where I grew up, but again, it's hard to test folks that you can't get at and that aren't complaining. But nonetheless, there are 100 confirmed. The City Department of Homeless Services reported that 109 New Yorkers had contracted the illness, with 99 cases in the city's sprawling shelter system as of this past weekend. Now, whenever we do this, whenever we talk about it, and I got a call yesterday from someone, and we had a fun debate, which I won. And again, they were well intended. How come you don't tell us how many people survive? When those planes went into 9/11, okay, no one said, well, planes flew into 9/11, but of New York's 9 million people, 3,000 died. 808,800,000 people survived a bombing yesterday. That is not how the news gets done now. For those of you concerned that the news is too draconian, and sometimes it is, depends on the outlet. What we do, at least what we try and do here, is we put it in context, and we're going to do that again, by the way. But for those of you who would like it to be, it's not sweet news, but hard news and troubling news has can be presented in many different ways. One is if the hard news has to be a warning, we're going to give it to you straight without, it's going to get context, but we're going to say, hey, run, the beast is coming. On the other hand, in something like this, here's how context matters. And I say it every morning, and I'm going to say it again, and this is my way of telling you that, you should be careful, but don't panic, live your life. And it really is a very slippery slope, like for geniuses, the slide to genius or being out of their skulls. Once again, if you look at 100% of those who will get those who were exposed to the virus, which is all of us, 80% in terms of ill health, it's going to cause little or no damage. 20% are going to get sick or and maybe not even know it. And of those, a smaller percentage, those who are weak, those for reasons who are genetically predisposed or have weak immune systems. And when I say weak, I mean maybe they have a heart ailment, or they have leukemia, or they suffer from COPD, heavy smokers, whatever. The virus is going to be tough for them, and they're going to be hospitalized, and they're going to get very sick. And then a percentage of those are going to die. So you know what that means? To put it in perspective, almost everyone listening to this, is not going to be physically affected, although you'll know someone who will be. You're not in grave danger. But there is that percentage at that top of the pyramid, if you will, who are older or infirm for another reason, who will be affected and or who will die, a subset of that. And so most of you are going to do fine. But this is an effort to protect a part of our society for whom that is not the case. Now, that's perspective. But what we're not going to do is come on and say that of the 8 million people, and it's true, in New York, only 58,000 have the virus and only 4,000 have died, or whatever the numbers happen to be. We're going to do that after we tell you that 10 more people died. I don't recall when we firebombed Tokyo. It was a very successful bombing, but don't worry, 3,000 people lived. But it's just not how it's done. But again, I understand the inclination of some to want us to make the news positive. Context makes the news balanced, not trying to falsely and to patronize you that you wouldn't like. We know you wouldn't like it. Honest, you wouldn't. All righty, we're going to go back, give the weather another look. You're listening to and watching. Oh, God, frightening. That's me. Watching Radio Westchester here. Radio Westchester, we are your radio station at the train station. We are broadcasting as follows. Now, in some ways, we're a victim of a digital success. The digital success is that we are on many, many outlets, and so people get confused like they're at the donut shop. Which one should I do? If you just want to listen to audio, just go to radiowestchester.com and click on Listen Live. Or go ahead, if you want to listen just to the radio part of it, to the aggregators. And these are the classic aggregators that you hear about, TuneIn Radio, MyTuner Radio. Go to that and click on the icon that says Morning with Bob Marrone, or click on the one that says radiowestchester.com. We're also on iTunes. We are on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Now, we're also on all of the major social media sites. In fact, many of you watch on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Periscope. There are a few others, but those are the biggies. And we intend to keep broadcasting on those, and we can track who listens and for how long, or watches and for how long, if you can stand that picture. Alrighty, I'm Bob Marrone. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. It is 40 out there, getting up to 54. Mixture of sun and clouds today, but no rain, zip zero, and that is a good thing. The weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And this bottom of the hour has been supported by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and Plug-In Virtual Reality. And let's not forget my friends over, and I call them my friends because I love their food, over at the Beachmont. I'm going to spend a moment about that. And the only way I can do that is the restaurants that I think of. And I think they're all open. But again, what happens is the people in charge, a lot of them are home. They've got a staff, and they're having them work. And we want to remind you of some of the better restaurants in town. I did get a text from one, and I'm going to mention their name. And those of you who know me know that, well, no. I was going to say something, and then it wouldn't have been right because it was an old incident that I had. But we have some fine and iconic restaurants here, and I want you to help them out if you can. See if they have a one of those gift cards. Buy it now for when this thing is over, and go eat. But I'll share my favorites in town. They're the favorites that a lot of us have. Everybody knows that if I do have a business lunch, it's almost always at Modern, because it's easy to get to from here, but it's my favorite restaurant in town. I unabashedly say that. I can't get a hold of them because the bosses aren't there, and you go and you see the help. Well, he's not here. But I love their food, and I love the way they treat you when you go in there. And I have, for those of you who know that I'm trying to lose still more weight, I still play hockey, as all of you know, and every pound makes me slower. But I go and occasionally pick up some food there for the takeout, and it is great, as always. Please patronize them. It's their competitor, but another great restaurant is Posto 22, right around the corner. In fact, what's cool is some of them aren't open on certain days, and you can sneak in one or the other. Next to them, another good place, the Wooden Spoon. They do nice stuff. Down on the corner, been there for years, Coromandel, really fine restaurant. Of course, my favorite place to get a burger, and it always surprises people, and to go in, and if you're going to have a drink with someone or meet someone over a bubbly, where better to go than the Beachmont Tavern, where I described a burger the other day, which I love and made someone hungry. Try and go to those restaurants. And then there's the Tavern up in the North End. I like that place, the North End Tavern. Please don't forget them either. There's a Chinese place. Some of the other takeouts. Do you know what was a nice surprise? And again, they're getting free advertising, but I don't care. We've got to help one another. Domino's. It's late at night, and we do that here. I was here very late yesterday. It's late at night, and this is even after they're open. I want you to remember this. Late at night, and you don't want to go to the diner, and as much great as the diners are. Not, by the way, I love the big diner over in the New Rochelle Diner. I love the Rochelle Diner in the North End, one of my favorite places, and the Carvel's next to it, occasionally. But I digress. Maybe you don't want to have to go sit down, drive to the diner. It's 11 to 12 o'clock, and you got to get up in the morning. And you know that if you go there, you're going to get a giant open roast beef sandwich and go nuts with food. And maybe you just wanted something quicker and dirtier. And that's not dirty. But so one night I was here really late, and I went over to Domino's and ordered. They have their little $6 pizza. Man, it was good, especially when it comes out hot. Oh, the cheese, it's good stuff. So you're in a pinch, even though we all love our favorite pizzerias, you want to go there. And for just 2 slices. Now, I don't know why it works this way, but it does. Well, don't forget Tzatzikis Grill, too. If you like Greek food, that place is great. But if I'm driving from a business contact, or I'm endlessly at Staples, and I'm driving back from on Main Street, heading towards Huguenot and down that little skip where it splits at Huguenot. Fratelli's Pizza, small place. Pop formed it. He's passed now, but of course you have right next to it. My goodness. the Pop's Espresso place. They've got takeout available. They will make the cannoli in front of you. They will create this wonderful cannoli, and we know some people who would stick their head in a vat of cannoli cream and suck it out like a butterfly on a flower. But they will make it in front of you. And heaven forbid you get something like a cream puff to die for. But right next door, small little pizza place, Fratelli's Little Pizza Place. Gotta tell you, just getting 2 slices comes right out. And as much as I love, and I do, and I get it by the pie over at Marrone, great stuff. And let's go look down to Marrone too. So if anyone that hasn't eaten at Sal's hasn't eaten good pizza. And even they commit the mortal sin because they got to make a living. You know, they make salad pizza. This is not the place to call and justify that you eat salad pizza. Anyway, I can go on and on. And I'm mentioning this because these are the places that all of us love. And some of the great diners, if you go down North Avenue, there's some great diners there. What's the big Greek diner? And anyway, it'll all come back to me. I'll prepare something for this. I didn't get permission from any of these people to do this. These are the places that I like, and so you're stuck with me thinking this at the top of my head. And I'm going to miss many, and no offense. If you email us, bob@radiowestchester.com, hey, mention me, I will. And maybe there was one in that list that when I ran the chamber, and I won't say who it was, because this is the time for peace, that when I ran the chamber, when I first took it over, treated me very badly. I walked in, where are you guys? I never get anything from you. Get out of here. But they need us now. And they need people who do what I do. And I did not mention a restaurant that does not have good food. And I haven't been at Dudley's in a while, just because of circumstance. And I know they're being sold, but they were great. I imagine they still have their barge burger and all that stuff. And, oh, yes, how could I not mention Caridad on Main Street? If all you want, friends, and they do have takeout, and it's very dangerous because you go in and they have this where you look at the takeout, and you can't walk by. And it's a very interesting mix of Latin food and Italian food and even American dishes. It's got them all. But 2 things I highly recommend, and it's simple. They will give you a half of chicken, half a chicken, and especially if you get the lunch special. They got a half a chicken there, and you can get it with rice and a couple of other things. I don't get any of the plantains and all that. For me, it's fried bananas. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm just talking about all of us everyday folk. You get a half a chicken, you get rice, you can get the yellow rice, you get the rice with beans, a couple of other things. And they have the best European coffee you will get. And I don't know why it is. I don't get it. Really great coffee there as well. So don't forget Caridad. And I don't mean to miss anyone, but I can go on and on and on, okay? What I'm saying is, and I took a lot of time out of the program just to give free advertising to these people. Please remember them. They're dying. They've had to lay off people. We're struggling here. We have our own issues, which we are addressing. We were here really late last night working on that. But in so doing, we realized I don't have 20 waiters that I'm going to lay off. I don't have cooks and chefs, some of which are going to be laid off, and people's whole livelihoods. And the men and women that run these restaurants that are in chains, they're in trouble. So we got to do our best. If you're going to take out food, try and call one of these places. Or if you're going to pick it up, make sure you have your gloves on or whatever. Go and pick it up yourselves, but help them out. And equally, last night when I was leaving, you know what I felt for? When it was busy here at the train station, we would have right out front. I don't even have to leave the windows open anymore and create our bubble, although I open half of them now because no one's here. I leave the door open, the curtains, and the door open, and some of them open. Today I don't have any open. It was a late night. But I was here late, and when I left, there were 2 cab drivers chatting with each other. Masks on, and one had a mask on. He had enough cleaning stuff in his car that he could have cleaned the whole radio station himself. And, it's gotten those of us who were still working, we kind of look at each other like dogs who meet, sniff. What are you doing here? Hi, how you doing? And boy, their business is dead. And we used to have all the cabs lined up and hundreds of people going to and fro. And now it's all they're starving. But here were men have to feed their families, and some women out here late at night, hoping that one or two people would get off the train and give them some work. So if you got a cab driver in the family, pat him on the back too. And especially if you've got a cop, a fireman, a woman, an EMS worker. And I mentioned yesterday, I'm trying to get a look at the people that work here and that come in. I mentioned yesterday, only apropos of it, what do you see in the morning? The few people that I come by are like 80% African American. And of that, I would say most are women. So I'm beginning to think a lot of nurses and stuff. And again, this is a very diverse city, and we're downtown, so that might explain the ethnic mix. But also the fact that this is a station that has everybody going to Wall Street, it just I don't know what to think about that, but it is what it is. But I do know that they're marching along and going to work, and if you talk with them and occasionally going in and out, I do. Not too many people feeling sorry for themselves or anything like that. They're just on their way doing what they do. So you got that doctor, that nurse, and that cab driver, those people out there still making the place work, the few people that are going to the restaurants, that are doing government work. They're taking a risk. Some of them absolutely have to. Others do it because they want to help people. Anyway, that's just my little spiel. And if you got a restaurant that you love, tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to open up the phones now, and I'm going to do one of the list of stories. 914. And again, last night we fixed our broken phone line, but I can't get the volume up. We'll try and fix that today. So it's 914 999 4006 999 4006. If there's a restaurant you love or a food dish you love, call us up. Tell us about it. Help them out. Call up and brag about it. I'm not going to charge you a penny. We're going to use these microphones today to help out businesses, to help out individuals, to shed light on those people like up in Temple, Israel, that are going back to the temple. And in there, their blood is being drawn to help develop some sort of a cure. Thank you. And I actually felt for it. Yesterday I was checking out Facebook, see what was going on. And many of you remember a guy by the name of Larry. Hold on, I'm losing my brain. I had so many thoughts rolling through my head. Larry used to do the morning show before me, and Larry Goldstein, sorry. Used to do the morning show before I took it over at WVOX. Great guy, later went on to work in government. Very smart man. And I'm a radiophile, so even before I had the morning show, I was doing nights at WVOX and working the board and doing all those things that you do. Many years ago now, 15 years ago maybe, when I started out. But I would listen to Larry, and when Passover came or Hanukkah, Larry would tell these stories of the dinners, the Seder dinner and all of that. I would be real envious, but it sounds really good. He'd invite this person over, he'd talk about his Aunt Millie, or he'd talk about this person, or he'd talk about that person. And he was talking about how that bite was not likely to be in this coming season. And I sent him a text about it because it's funny. For those of you who like radio, remember stories like that. But it did make me realize that a lot of us are not going to have the usual Easter or Passover holiday that we do. But Larry used to tell it in a way, used to tell the story in a way that make you want to be there. And in fact, I have some Jewish relatives that married into the family, if you will, now my family. And I finally got invited to a Seder dinner. And it made me feel pretty good. And Larry doesn't know this, but I thought of him when I got indicted because I was jealous. I mean, I'm sure that people who don't, for whatever reason, celebrate Christmas, when they come to a Christian's house and celebrate Christmas, it probably feels pretty good. So anyway, for those of you who are Jewish, I know you're going to have your holiday, and it's not going to be the same, but try and make it nice for everybody here. Likewise, last night we did some practice runs, and I got my grandson on the phone. We're going to get him on, I think, Friday. He's one of those nuts that likes those board games, likes category and stuff. And those are a lot of fun games to play. So maybe as we look forward to the Easter and Passover holidays and other holidays that you may celebrate, we can kind of enjoy that together and talk about what some of those particular, why did I put my computer so far away? Some of those particular games are and family events are and how much fun you have. Don't ask me why I put my computer all the way over here. We got some other stories we have to talk about. So it is 7:10, the lineup today, which I put someplace, and I probably have it in my briefcase, but I know it by heart. I don't even know why I have to look. Vince Russo opens us up at 7:20. He's kind of like if you've ever been to one of those night shows, the guy that comes out first and kind of warms everybody up. But nonetheless, you got a restaurant you like, call us all during the show. We'll put you on. All right, we've got a ship. Now, we talked about this with Harlan Ullman last week, but now this is the real deal. What happens when you get someone on a boat, a military ship? Well, it has happened. The USS Theodore Roosevelt commander says his entire crew needs to be isolated. 200 seamates tested positive for the virus. Now, in terms of projections, there are, they think that as many as 240,000 Americans will perish as a result of the virus, and that is because of social distancing and the steps that they're taking. Otherwise, they tell us it would be much worse, and that's the context there. But even there, for those of you who said, well, tell us who survived. Yeah, 300 million Americans survived, but 240,000 died. The only war we lost more people in was the Civil War. Otherwise, that tops any other war that we've ever been in. Burger King, Popeyes are using thermometers on workers, but they're paying bonuses for April amid the outbreak. Some doctors are saying, and these are but again, this is the doctor's role, and this is where we need balance. Again, a simple story, broke my leg really badly 18 years ago. You should never play hockey again. Well, I played 800 games since then, so I'm fine. Well, maybe not so much up here. And that's their job, to tell you what the downside is, and then you mix risk into that. But anyway, some doctors are saying we need enforceable national self-isolation, and that's where reason comes in. This is a free society. People calculate risk all the time. There's got to be a touch of balance here, just at least a touch. And while I understand your doctors are right, if we put everybody in the house, nobody'd ever get sick, nobody'd ever break a leg, nobody would ever trip and fall over a curb, some people would slip in the bathtub and die or overdose. But I get it, doctor, and we're doing that. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that, well, we just should have gone on with our lives and let people die. I get it, but let's not get so crazy that no one ever gets sick, no one ever lives, no one ever has sex, no one ever kisses another person or shakes their hand or loves a baby or takes a meatball hero in their hands and squishes it in their face and enjoys life. Sorry, we're not going that far. Don't flush coronavirus disinfectant. I know my eyes are shot today. That's because I didn't change my contact lenses. Don't flush coronavirus disinfectant wipes down the toilet. The EPA is warning that. And why? Well, first of all, it causes clogs, but also you've got an issue of getting the virus into the water to some degree. I got to get more information on this. Let me see what I can find. It was on Fox News. Probably the Democrats did it. They put it in, it's poison the water. Don't flush corona. The EPA, Environmental Protection. Let's see what happens. Okay, Lysol wipes, Kleenex, and other You see what just happened? And I told you about this the other day. And it doesn't happen with newspapers. You get the story up, okay? And I am telling this to Google, the people that make computers, the people that build the websites. Hey, a-holes. If you want us to read your news, especially if we buy it, and I'm reading the news and you make an ad, push it down or push it up, and I have to follow it like a cockroach on the floor that I want to spray, it builds contempt for your brand. Like just happened. I'm reading. Oh no, that was got an ad. Oh no, go to the other story. Oh now move it to the left. Oh now put an ad in for an oximeter. Oh now put an ad in that some jerk stops talking in the middle of it. No, I know there are filters you can buy. I shouldn't have to do all that. I get it. You have to make money. Okay. When I scroll to the next story, put the ad in between. Don't keep moving the screen. It makes me hate you. Good. Feel better now. All right. Where was I? God only knows. Medical waste. Oh, I'm going to go back to that story. I'm going to stop. Let's see where it goes now. Okay. Officials with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency issued a warning recently urging Americans to only flush toilet paper and dispose of disinfectant wipes. Flushing toilet paper helps ensure that the toilets, plumbing, sewer systems, and septic systems will continue working properly. Okay, so it's gumming up the works. I don't know that it's spreading infection, but just thought that I would mention that. Now, here's the interesting thing, folks. For those of you who love computers and what they can do for us, but have contempt for the people who design websites, you all should be beaten with sticks, okay? Unless you do it better. Like there's one outlet, and I won't say which. They have built the most aesthetically lovely website in the world on one of these outlets. God forbid you try and switch from one thing to another, from one story to another. Can't happen with a newspaper. I am in charge. Not the geek that doesn't know what's important, that doesn't know how to edit a news story, that doesn't know the principles of what's important and what's not, who wants to put on their website whether or not I like kittens ahead of whether or not there was a plane crash that killed 10,000 people. Well, it didn't kill that many. All right? Hire adults. Would you do that? And those of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's see. Now, I'm going to try and go back to the list of stories I was working on. This is not going to go well. In fact, I'm not even going to try because I have to go to break and I have to get Vince Russo on. Let's do this. I'm not really as ornery as I sound, folks. It's just that these are the things that we used to do in radio before the coronavirus, and it's fun, you know. It's fun to expunge your demons. When I get the New York Times or the New York Post, just so you all psycho right and left wingers don't get upset, I decide, I look at the stories, I look at the way they're presented, and I get to them. Can't do that on the web. Even if they have a really good website. Times isn't bad. Post pretty good. Best sports on the planet in the Post. Anyway, I decide, I get the whole thing. When there becomes a way to do it, really do it on the web. Some sort of microcosm of the stories. That's why the Times is a pretty good website. But still, give me the paper, please. And that's why show prep's so important. Okay, let's look at the weather once again when I wasn't having a hissy fit. See, that happens when I get upset. The wheels are coming off, ladies and gentlemen, in the... I sound like Rush. All right, Rush. Do I get a Medal of Freedom? No. Because I try and be honest on the air. There'll be no Medal of Freedom for me, from the right or the left. I've noticed that since I started bashing the school system, I lost some listeners from the left that used to call in. But they liked it when I was bashing the right, didn't they? And I continue to, but no. Everybody wants me to be all one-sided. That's not going to happen. All righty. The weather. It is 40, and it's clear. It's clear right now. We're going to have a mixture of sun and clouds today, getting up to the mid-50s, but it will be overcast off and on. No rain, zero rain, and that is a good thing. But overcast and sun and clouds, no rain. Partly cloudy tonight, getting down to 37. Thursday, can you believe it's Thursday already? And don't forget, it's April Fools, April 1st. Thursday, we will have increasing clouds after some sun. Mostly cloudy after that, but still no rain. You got to wait for Friday to that. And on Friday, we will have rain early, and then that will dissipate, and we'll get up to 55 degrees. Saturday, partly sunny, 54. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit ghgc.org. Good morning. We're going to have to remind Vince to call in. Sometimes he's got a clock that's like 7 minutes off. He's a politician. You think he'd pay someone to fix his clock? Having some fun. Welcome to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. It is Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. Welcome to the program. 40 degrees. There he is. See, I insulted him into coming on. 40 degrees. Getting up to 54 today. A lovely day. We've already covered the headlines with you. We've talked about sponsors. We've talked about favorite restaurants. Friday, we're going to be talking about games. Today, we're going to be talking about all kinds of different things. But let's go to the phone and see what Vince is up to. First, enjoy about 20 beats of the music. Good morning, young man. You actually called on time. Did you hear me insulting you?
Yes, I did. I guess I got up a little bit too late.
What? You missed me ranting. Well, actually, you know what you missed? You missed me talking about food. I don't know if you heard that part, but I'm giving free advertising to all the restaurants. I'm trying to help out my brothers and sisters out there because we in private business are being hit right between the eyes, and we got to keep upbeat and help each other.
Well, that's good. I think you should do that. You know, any of these people who are hanging in there and trying to serve the public, you know, throughout this whole thing need to be, get accolades and do as much as we can for them.
Yeah, and I even did something the president wouldn't do. No, I did. There was one on my list, without getting into who they were, who when I ran the Chamber of Commerce as a second job, or for depending on how you look at it, when I walked in their restaurant, they treated me very badly because my predecessors had never walked in there. So it was like, well, you guys didn't do a thing for me. So I just took the job. I mean, and then they beat me with sticks. But this is not the time for retribution because it's a great place. This is the time we got to help one another out. And I only say that, because I guess it still sticks in my craw a little, but then I know it's the right thing to do. I'm fighting the urge to out them. But there is a lesson in that too, and it was the second part of a fun monologue I did while I was reading a news story. I try and do it off the computer, but it's helpless. It's hopeless because for their need for advertising, it's like playing gosh damn whack-a-mole. In the middle of reading a story, it flipped up. and no, but see, you know why this happens, Vin? I want you to help me. I need professional care because I know people that do this kind of work. You know that old adage, every hammer sees the world as a nail?
Right.
Well, almost every person that designs a website sees the website as their canvas. I don't care. Make it work. I don't. It's one of my even beefs with cell phones. Did you ever try and turn off some iPhones? Better you hit them with a hammer. You can't turn it off. You can't turn it on. It beeps. It bleeps. But okay, that's all part of it. They're great devices. But what people have done to websites requires the return of corporal punishment.
Well, the problem with websites too is they need to be constantly maintained. You go to a website and it's 2 years old. You see things on there that don't work, or it says click here for such and such information, and it's not there, or you have to dig down so deep to find what you want that it makes it very frustrating, and you say, the heck with this.
And then there's that ubiquitous, you press a button and it says code 40. Does anybody know what code 404 means? What the hell is that? Code 404. And the geeks, they look at you like it's you. You're Luddite or okay boomer. And I want to choke them. Did you have fun writing your website? Were the colors pretty? Were they pretty? But where can I just find the phone number to the restaurant? Well, yeah, but look at that beautiful picture of baked filet or whatever. I don't care.
Well, I had that problem with my telephone, this whole thing with the time, I thought you couldn't even change the
Well,
time.
oh, you
For
heard
half
about
an hour.
telephones, huh? Mr. Collier.
Yeah, gee whiz, I tell you what.
No, I was upset because in the middle of reading a story and it flipped and went up on me. And that's why I still, when people see me buy newspapers and they say, why do you do that? Because I'm a news person. I don't need, and that's another thing, because of all of the data mining, even the websites, they try and give you stories that they think you want to read. They think they know you. They don't know that I am using the news as a palette myself to create a balanced news story.
Hmm.
For example, I finally spent several hours. It was either that or kill myself. No,
That's an alternative,
no, of turning. No, but you see, right or left, when the extreme right or left thinks that you're one of them, they send you stories that people in mental hospitals couldn't make up. Proof that the Clintons were killing babies in Oshkosh during the air show. I can't. I won't.
Well, see, that's the problem with all of this business. If you click on a certain story, that information gets captured somewhere, and they use it,
Oh yeah.
I guess, or sell it to certain other people.
Like you told me
and
the other day about all the porn sites you kept getting emails on. I heard you were right.
Yeah, and you get all these emails, or you get these pop-ups about various things that you think you look at. I mean, I don't know.
No.
I think the internet in general has been just an amazing tool for research and news stories and things like that. But boy, oh boy, it's been used to try and prop up people's pocketbooks more than anything else.
Well,
I
you know
think.
what? But everything is, and that's the American way. But we have not yet figured out how to the extent that one might regulate it, because the disinformation out there is incredible. Yeah, and the stories. I mean, some of them are from the left too. The president's planning to invade Staten Island next week. It just from the left. I can't. Doing the news will drive you nuts.
Yeah.
It will if you let it. That's why sometimes I pick up out of my bookcase a Dilbert book and just read a cartoon.
Well, we've not heard anything about the upcoming presidential election. I mean, Joe Biden's kind of fallen off the face of the earth.
Well, yeah, because he's not at the end. He probably hates that too. And in fact, that's why But it shows you though how malleable the population is. I mean, he's an effective governor. He got elected twice, even if you don't like him all the time. But now all of a sudden, oh look, we need to vote for Mr. Cuomo. He's the man. Cuomo's the good grief because he's on TV, which Trump figured out a long time ago. Ronald Reagan did too, and others. It's just the way it is.
Well, maybe people are looking and saying, who out there is actually competent, and Cuomo has proven that he is. I think he's done an excellent job.
In terms of public presentations, okay. In terms of public presentations, because I'm not trying to bash the president entire, but that's not hard to do. I mean, because the president's like a drunk guy at the end of the bar. Oh, I got a phenomenal guy, Matt, sells pizza down in, he talks that way about war, We got a phenomenal army. We ripped him to shreds. But the problem is he has a lot of people that love that talk. Guy I know, it just really broke my heart yesterday. And I need to understand this. Now, and we have the AOCs, and back in the 60s, and I always have to say this because people think you're not even-handed unless you do. The far left was much worse. But there is an anger and a hatred among the far right that they condemn every Democrat. They make them out to be monsters, a-hole liberals, and
unpatriotic.
No, well, no. But that's where I've already won that debate. I am so sick of people on the far right wrapping themselves in a flag that they don't even understand. They think it's about guns and America being the best, and it's not. But so they should go and get the Confederate flag or get themselves some other flag.
Well, maybe the result of this whole virus thing might be the realization that we actually need to elect somebody who's in some way competent to run the country.
Well, who knows? But you know what, though? Again, I have to be, and I accept it, I have to accept the consequences of my own philosophy, which is if the majority of Americans want a far-right president, well, then that's what we ought to have. But then that far-right president or far-left president, they need to play by the same rules so that when we don't like what they're doing. The problem is that both sides want, the age-old line, one form of tyranny is replaced by another. I mean, I always use the Me Too movement for that. This wonderfully inspired movement that women needed. It's also perverted itself into you're guilty without due process now. That's not American.
Yeah, it's not, and the trouble with
But if I may stop, the thing I don't understand is when, like this guy that posted this thing on Facebook yesterday. I mean, he doesn't even know me. He thinks he knows me because we know one another from hockey, but officially he hates me. I mean, that's my point. I don't exclude anybody from my list of people I love and like, and I defend the right all the time. I don't hear enough defense of people who have left-leaning ideas at all from the right.
Yeah, because if they don't agree with their point of view, they dismiss it as either, on the one hand, un-American, or on the other hand, well, just wrong-headed.
They're not wrong-headed, evil, weak. Everybody thinks, if I call you weak, it's the worst possible thing that you could be. Good God.
Well,
it's the same with the AOCs on the other side,
Yeah, the problem with electing someone, like Trump, if he had the goose that laid the golden egg, he would kill the goose to try and get the eggs out because A, he's greedy and self-serving, and B, doesn't understand the process of how eggs are produced.
Well, yeah. Well, do you remember when I used to have the political editor of the Washington Times on regularly, and this is one now on the other end of the stick was Barack Obama, and I said, let me ask you something. I said, if Barack Obama had the cure for cancer in his pocket, and a Republican could get their hands in and steal it and rip it up, a lot of people would die, but they'd win. Would they do it? And he'd say, yeah, probably, but I got to tell you, so would the Democrats. And that stayed with me now over a decade, because that's the problem that we have. It's on both sides, But either both sides, I know that a lot of people locally in the left are upset with me because of my outing their school picadillos and their agenda-driven nonsense. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people on the right, no matter how many times I bash the left, when I call Trump out, don't like me. And that's the risk of doing honest radio. But it's just troubling. In fact, I wrote something the other day, and I stick to it. I have found covering the Trump presidency much more painful, much more depressing, much more heartbreaking than the coronavirus. And the expression I used is, with all the information that came out, and it has to do with the people that don't like the left, for good reason in a lot of cases, all the information that came out about Trump and the things he said and the way he's behaved and the acceptance of that, the analogy I use is imagine, these are my feelings in my gut, imagine an uber-religious person who is certain that there's a God and now finds out that there is none. And that's how I feel about democracy in America after these last 3 years, that it has been compromised.
Well, it sure hasn't been practiced, that's for sure. I mean, the way...
Well, it hasn't been in practice as intended. And again, I believe now that the left would do it too. It's just that Trump exposed it.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's really...
Anyway, let's get back on the positive side of things. I say we get all web developers and shoot them. Let's get them out and shoot them. I just, oh, it's so pretty. No, but look what I've given you. This website will show you 57 pictures in a minute. I just want the phone number. That's another thing. But you know who I out all the time? Politicians. I'm running. I'm accessible. But they won't. They want you to fill out a form on their website.
Well, that's everybody. I mean, you'll go to any kind of, store or company that manufactures something or things like that, and they say, contact us, click here. And you click on it, and it's a thing to send them an email. and you
I don't do
almost
business with those
never
people. I
can
don't do
find.
business with those people
Well, you don't have any choice anymore because
in
it's
some
almost
cases.
everyone.
But when you're a politician, don't tell me you're easily accessible. Don't do it.
Well, they feel they are, and you know what? Maybe to today's generation, not old fogies like us, maybe that is being accessible. Because these kids use these phones like, if for some reason the phone system or whatever broke down, they'd all commit suicide.
Not
I
if
mean,
you're running for office.
well, again, it's how you perceive the public um, being in contact with you. If you perceive that most of the public uses their phone, we get complaints all the time here in our little corner of the world, and people say, "Oh, I wasn't notified about such and such," and we say, "Well, we put it on the website, and we maybe send out an email or something like that," and people say, "We don't use that anymore. That's ancient. You got to send it to people's phones."
No, that's true. But another thing it does. I've been trying to back. I used to run the management school at Merrill for a lot of years, and I've been trying to get my head around the loss of good management, and a lot of it has to do with the web and voicemail and email made it easier for people to be bad.
Well, I agree with that. When I was managing in the same firm, the first thing I did when I became the manager of this little department, I called my people together, and I said, "Look, if I say, did you get such and such information, and you tell me, oh, I sent them an email," I said, "that is not acceptable. I
No,
don't want to hear that."
I'm
I
with
said,
you.
"We're not in the business of sending emails. We're in the business of getting information.
Right.
So if I don't care if that became the biggest cop out
But it
in the
is same
world."
thing. They send you to voicemail or whatever, and then say, "Well, I texted you." Don't wait. I tell everybody, if you text me urgently, you're doing the wrong thing because I'm not going to get right back. I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to be a good executive. You can always tell an executive who sucks because they're on their email all day. Hey, listen, I gotta go. Thank you for the warm up. I'll be in touch.
All right. Talk to you
Talk to you
soon.
later. Bye bye. Ken Kracher's up next. We want to talk about veterans. And again, folks, when I talk like that and I tell you honestly about my feelings, it doesn't make me right. It's just how I feel about things. I'm sure people felt that way, or some may have felt that way when Barack Obama was in office. Your feelings and your thoughts are more valuable than mine, but those are just some of mine. And again, I just want people to try and see the other side. Some people do. People that call here and who disagree with me 80% of the time do. Anthony Galletto looks at the other side of things. Tom from Pelham looks at the other side of things. But then we get people that just hate. Just hate. We got to stop just hating. And stop flushing the coronavirus stuff down the toilet. Please put it in the garbage so you don't gum up. You should be selling your stock. Fisher Investments. God, one more pop-up. I'm going to throw my computer against the wall. All righty, I know that Ken Kracher's due, and another he's very tech nice. Probably going to send me a text. Now, I tried to call, and I couldn't get through. Yeah, there he is. Call back. See, if you're going to be a regular on the show, all right, and you don't listen, tried to call in, no answer. Well, yeah, call back. Call back, Ken. I told you he would do that. See, they're not listening to the show, but they're calling. Well, that's because he's a guest, and he's a good guest too, and a good radio man. So he'll call back. Not on this line. Will he call on the airline? All right. Let's reset and let's look at what's coming today. We're going to talk with him, then we're going to open the phones a little bit. Jake comes on at 8 o'clock, Ivar Hayden at 8:20, A.J. Woodson at 8:35, and then Harlan Ullman at 9 o'clock. Now, the New York budget, 9 issues to watch because they're finally going to get to it. One, closing a massive budget gap, and I don't think he heard me, so let me get back to him again. This is when I'm working by myself, interviewing the organization. Call now. Oh, no answer. Call now. I said to him to call now. Alrighty. Closing a massive budget gap. we do have that massive budget gap. That's number one. Addressing the cost of the coronavirus. You know that that's going to cost us. You know we're going to have to pay more for Medicaid. You know that the federal government is not going to give us enough money to offset the budget problems. Funding schools amid a budget cap. That's going to be a problem. Pocketbook issues at stake in this state budget. No kidding. Will New York legalize marijuana? We already discussed this morning and put it in the news. It will not do it this year, what with the coronavirus and the budget gap pre-existing. The controversy over bail reform. What somebody needs to go is take Hasty, the guy, the uber liberal in charge of the assembly, and I'm not talking about physically, I'll take him to the woodshed and say, what is your problem? Okay. Common sense never failed anybody. Or what they should do is they should take each one of these people who have 30, 40 arrests and that never hardly spend any time in jail or that do violent crimes, and they should put them in little cells right around wherever Hasty lives and let him deal with it. Will Cuomo get more control in the budget process? He has too much control already. Although, thank goodness in this case, because now that the Senate is all Democrat and the Assembly is all Democrat, they'll give away the store. And lawmakers working in Albany during budget negotiations. Well, they should be. That's all I have to say. All right, Ken Kreitzer does many things. Ken he has several websites, and he does a lot of broadcasting, and he does a lot of work for veterans. He does a lot of covering of local sports, of local major sports, Army football, Iona College. Spent some time with us a week or two ago talking about the hiring of Rick Pitino. Please welcome, without further ado, Ken Kreitzer. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, Bob. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing? Ken, I wanted to get into, if I may, how has the virus affected the military, and particularly our veterans? And did you see the story this morning? One ship out there has 200 cases.
Yes, the USS Theodore Roosevelt out in the Pacific. They had to bring it into, I think it's in Guam, and taken off its mission, which is a big deal because it was the only operational aircraft carrier in the Pacific. The two others are off of, we're in the Persian Gulf right now to keep a full court press on Iran, including the Harry Truman. I think it's Dwight Eisenhower. So that's a big deal to have 200 sailors, and that's the problem on a ship. Once you have one sailor, they live in very close quarters. Especially the berthing spaces. I've been in them. You'll have room that accommodates 100 sailors. They're all like 3 or 4 in bunk beds. In alcoves. So they're really concerned about that. What they did is they're trying to give each sailor on the ship a test for COVID, and apparently they can only do 200 a day because apparently that's the quantity of tests they can get. It's very hard to get 5,000 COVID-19 tests.
That's all they got. So do you think that the 200 they came up with were just the 200 tests they had? There may be more, but
no. Well, they said it was they did 900 tests and they got 200 positives.
Now,
it's a ship of that's a ship of 5,000 sailors.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, because something I just thought of with my tiny brain. Don't sailors, because of the change of shifts, don't they share berths as well? In other words, you have it for 8 hours, I get it for 8, or whatever the case may be.
It's only in submarines.
Oh, okay.
And that's in they call it hot berthing because you have about 110 to 150 sailors on a submarine, and they just don't have the amount of spaces, so they do that sometimes. And it's one of those practices they do, which is probably not a great idea. But in this case, what they're doing now is they're quarantining sailors for 2 weeks before the ship is now going out to sea. So when the submarines have been leaving on patrols, they've been assembling the crew 2 weeks in advance on the sub, and they can't get off. So they sit at the dock, for the 2 weeks to try to make sure everybody's healthy.
How long are those patrols? I think you mentioned it. It may have gone.
Well, it can go 3 to 6 months. The ballistic missile submarines, the boomers, go out typically for 3 months, I understand, and the attack submarines like the Virginia class go out for, whatever the mission is. It could be as much as 6 months, but typically they'll come up and enter a port somewhere to get a little bit of a break for the crew. So that's a big issue for the Navy, and the Army is looking at the same thing. And West Point has sent all of its cadets home. They were actually on spring break, so they extended spring break 2 weeks. But then they said it's indefinite when they're going to come back. And they're really under the gun because the cadets at West Point and the other service academies have quite a number of requirements that they have to complete, both academic, military, training that they have to do, and they have to check the box in each one of those in order to graduate. So they're looking at, I got to think they're thinking about postponing graduation from Memorial Day weekend into the summer, hoping that they can get the cadets back at some point, maybe in, May or June to finish up the year. And I don't know if you heard this, but the U.S. Air Force Academy had two of their cadets die last week. They decided to bring their seniors back onto the campus so that they could complete their requirements. The other 3 classes were sent home, but the seniors were kept one to a room, and 2 of them died. And it sounds like they're concerned about suicide. One was on a Thursday, one was on a Saturday. They haven't said anything, but all the indications are. So it's very sad. We have a chance to visit out to the Air Force Academy, and they've been very gracious to us. And so, everybody's dealing with that. West Point had, I think, 8 cases, 3 cadets, and 5 employees, according to General Williams, the superintendent. So it's a real challenge. Any place you have gatherings of people who work in close proximity, and that's what the military does.
Ken Kreitzer is our guest. He's an expert, and he has a radio show on WVOX each Monday on veterans affairs, etc. He also covers sports. He covers Iona basketball. He covers Army football and other Army sports extensively. And as you can see, he knows his way around the military and veterans issues. Just a question going back, how many subs are out there at any point in time? Do you know? Any idea?
They don't. That's a very closely guarded.
That's what I figured.
Secret, but I would say typically probably a third of the submarine force. Typically, they say the Navy's got 100 ships at sea of their 300 at any one time, and the submarines follow that ratio. So you're looking, there's about 75 submarines in the U.S. Navy fleet. So you're looking about 20, 25 out at any one time, and that's a mix. Because they have the ballistic missile submarines, the Ohio class, out. They want to have 3 or 4 out all the time as a nuclear deterrent, and then the others are Virginia class that are tracking adversary submarines, and they're also out on other missions. So they're probably another 10 to 15, 10, 12 of the Virginia class out at any one time. There's a couple more.
Now, Ken, some of these classes
ones.
For our listeners, those are arcane titles. Which are the boomers? Which are the big ones with nukes on them?
Well, that's the Ohio class.
Okay, and how many?
Now they actually retrofitted a few of them to take out large numbers of Tomahawk missiles instead of ballistic missiles, nuclear missiles.
Okay, so those are some of the battles that we've fought and different things that we've done, I guess, in the Middle East.
Well, those are, the country pays a lot of money for those. The boomers, the new ones cost $5 billion a piece, and
Good
the
grief!
class go for $2.8 billion a piece. And right now, the Navy thinks they're probably the best ship in the Navy as far as effectiveness. So they're building 2 a year. They're trying to increase it to 3 a year. They actually build them up in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and obviously in Groton, Connecticut.
How many? And I know a lot of it's classified, but to the degree that you understand, how many missiles? And I know some missiles have independently targeted warheads in them, but how many missiles does a boomer carry?
Well, a bunch. I have no idea, actually. I mean, it's probably
wondering. No, it's just interesting stuff.
Like maybe 20. But as you said, they have multiple warhead tips that can go to different targets. Those are kind of things you hope never are used, but they've been part of this principle of a
Mad.
triad of defense
Now,
against
have they?
a nuclear attack.
You mentioned that they become the most important ship. Generally, we've considered our aircraft carriers, but you know where? Just an interesting thing, and I talk about Harlan Ullman with this, who's with us every. In fact, he's on today at 9 o'clock. Internationally renowned national security expert. He advises armies and governments all over the world. Anyway, there was the intermediate range missile or missile. I'm trying to remember which one it was, a treaty that we let expire, and it was dumb because when it expired, it mitigated the usefulness of our aircraft carriers because now we have to stay further away from shore. These are the little things that show up in the bottom of the newspaper that no one reads, and it compromises.
Well, I hadn't heard that particular correlation. I had read that a lot of the missiles that were covered by that were now antiquated. And it wasn't as, there needs to be a whole nother round of nuclear deterrence treaties, but obviously with this administration, you're not going to have discussions of limiting military
but
weapons.
also when these were non-nuclear missiles. These were simple missiles that before the treaty limited their ability to reach an aircraft carrier at a certain distance, so it allowed us to project power very close to our, let's just, instead of calling them adversaries, we'll call them rivals.
See, that's what you call a tactical nuclear weapon, and there really wasn't a lot of fear. I don't know if anyone's got a short-range weapon like that that I've heard of or read discussions of. They're just worried about an adversary like Iran. If they had launched, and I've never gotten a straight answer from anybody really, if they had launched those missiles they sent at the base in Iraq that killed a couple of American soldiers, if they had launched those at an American ship, how well would the Navy ship defend itself? Because they've got a couple layers of defense on that, but that just as standard tactical weapons that a country like Iran has is a big concern now for the Navy, and they are keeping the ships further from an adversary's coast so that they have a little bit more time to try to go through their layers of defense to knock down an incoming missile.
Interesting. Ken Kreitzer, our guest. What did I do to my sound? I almost blew my own ear off. Ken Kreitzer is our guest. Ken, let's move on to veterans and veterans affairs and the things that you do. I'm going to give you an anecdote. Well, it's not an anecdote. I know it to be true. I've got a dear friend, a veteran with several issues, not the least of which is he doesn't have his legs anymore. And just like every other business, the politics in his nursing home and the tyranny of some of the people that run and the way they treat veterans is abhorrent. But in general, he's happy with their care. If you will, in general, there's certain individuals and people that run things that he has a beef with, and others in his whole floor have a beef with. But in general, what is the care and the attitude? I know there are national and state homes. The state homes tend to be better run than the federal homes, by the way. It's been my experience having friends in these places. But what do you know about that? And disabuse me of my concerns if you can.
Well, most of the veterans I talk to who go down to the Kingsbridge facility of the VA in the Bronx say the care is very good, and they prefer it. We were at a meeting very early in March where we heard the secretary of the VA talk about the care being given and the feeling that a lot of veterans are choosing to go to VA facilities now when they have the option due to the Mission Act approved by Congress 2 years ago that gives them the option to go to private health care providers. And the secretary said that most of the veterans that he sees, I don't have the numbers on it, he was kind of maybe trying to lead a point, was that many veterans are choosing to stay with VA facilities.
The VA, yes, the VA hospital facilities and the doctors are wonderful. I was talking more of the nursing homes, and I'm speaking specifically.
Well, nursing homes are different, and I don't know a lot about them, but again, there's a lot of public and governmental oversight of anything to do with taking care of veterans right now. And if there were a sizable number of complaints about a VA nursing home, you'd hear about it.
Well, I'm going to be bringing my mics as soon as this crisis is over, and I hope someone is listening. But I'm going to be bringing them to the 5th floor of the VA hospital in St. Albans and raise some hell. I know of a specific case where it's very likely a person deprived someone of their medication to get even with them because they made a complaint.
Well, I mean,
there's no way I'm letting that go.
Nursing homes are a tough business, a tough care. I mean, we've all been to nursing homes where very elderly people are being taken care of, and it's a very difficult environment to begin with. And they're always going to be isolated issues or problems.
Well,
it's something we have to look into. I'll see if I can get a guest.
See if you can get me somebody who can talk about the VA and the federal VA, because I've been holding my fire because of the virus, and I was planning to do, because as it turns out, it isn't just 1 or 2 patients; it's a whole floor. And it's indicative, perhaps, of the larger, a lot of politics involved. And in general, and the funny thing is, it's like a sickness within a good body. You can tell that there are a lot of people that want to do well. But like in any other enterprise, you have the local politics of the nurses and the people that are on the floors and everything else. And they forget that these patients are sacred. I don't think that there's enough of an attitude for that. And you could see it really sticks in my craw. But at any rate, what have you got to tell us about veterans' efforts these days? I mean, we're doing much better than we used to. People like you are out there working hard for veterans. What have I not asked you? What do you want people to know?
Well, right now, the meeting we were at, the National Commander of the American Legion, Bill Oxford, who's a former Marine from North Carolina, talked about the need to reach out to elderly veterans and not so elderly, older veterans who may be living at home and making sure that they're okay. And he calls it the Check on a Buddy program. And we all need to do that, check on our older relatives and others who may be at risk and making sure they're okay, making sure they have adequate food, if they have, their medicine that they need. Because you don't want older people going out any more than they absolutely have to right now. Because they are at higher risk than everybody else. So that was really the message of the National Commander of the American Legion this month. There's, again, the big issue is really the implementation of the Mission Act to see what medical service can be provided privately, especially for veterans who do not live near a VA facility. And that's sort of been the big topic to look at, what the implementation is of that. But checking on veterans, they're still concerned about veterans' education right now because of the shutdown of a lot of schools. Veterans were obviously receiving tuition, and in some cases receiving housing allowances. So there's a lot of concern about how that's being managed now that schools have switched to distance learning.
Hey, can I mention one other thing while you mentioned it? Having some veterans in nursing homes. Because of the virus, now in most nursing homes, people can't even leave their rooms. They can't get guests. So if you get a chance to call someone or you get a chance to send them something, do it. Do it, because they're very lonely.
I have a 97-year-old aunt who lives in a assisted living facility in Rhode Island, and they've isolated all of the guests in that facility to their rooms, so they don't have the social gathering of meals during the day or activities. And it's real tough, so I've been trying to call every day up there now. And that's what I encourage listeners. Call your older relatives
do. Every day.
If it's a 5-minute phone call to break the day for them.
Absolutely. Hey, Ken Kreitzer, you do wonderful work, and you've given people a really good taste of it today. Thank you very much, and I hope you can pencil us in for a regular visit from now on. Thank you so much.
Whenever.
I'll get back to you.
I did want to mention it was a tragedy involving an Iona College basketball player. 3 college basketball players from the New York area who were all in their 40s or early 50s died of the coronavirus.
Oh, yeah, God bless them.
Including Jonathan Duck, who played for Iona in the late 1980s, early 90s. He was a big center, a husky guy. I always thought he had good hands. And there was a gathering on March 14th in Scarsdale, a birthday party for a player, and they decided to go on with the event.
Oh, and that's where, it's. But hey, listen, we got to go. Ken, thank you very, very much. Ken Kreitzer, everybody. We will get him back. All righty, we move on now to the weather, and let's take a look at the weather. And as we reset, Jake's going to join us in a few minutes. Remember, it's Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. I see sunshine, and I love it. That's Jake. It is 42 degrees. We're going to get up to 54 today. It was overcast earlier. Now we have sunshine. We're going to have a mixture of sun and clouds, but I bet you mostly sunshine today, and I bet you we kiss, embrace, hug, snuggle, caress. 60. Is that getting sexy over the weather? Anyway, sorry. Sun and clouds, though, tonight. Partly, I'm saying not sun, but sun and clouds today, rather. No chance of rain. Zips here. It's tonight's partly cloudy, getting down to 37. Tomorrow, increasing clouds in the morning, some sun in the afternoon, but okay at night, mostly cloudy. 50. It'll be 55 during the day, 42 at night. And Friday, rain early, but ending temperatures around 55. And Saturday, partly sunny, 54. The weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org and please patronize Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, plug in virtualreality.com, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern. Well, Jake and everyone else who walks, crawls, or even is a tiny little virus, I'm still getting over the math that you can fit 40 million coronavirus on the head of a pin. That's tiny. I mean, it's really small. Anyway, none of that is in here, just me, and no one else is allowed in until the virus is over. It's just me and the virus. Well, hopefully none. All righty, but Jake is on the telephone. He doesn't have to be here in person. Please welcome Jake Schaefer. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, Bob. When am I allowed in?
I don't know yet. I don't know.
I'm dying to get down there.
Although after hearing your wife's sexy voice, she can come in today. I'm going out. I'm sorry. What is she doing? What is she doing now?
She is currently in bed.
Well, now that's what I'm talking about. Why is she in bed? How come she's not teaching children how to drool on themselves? What's going on?
She does not have her first digital distancing lesson until 10 o'clock this morning.
Why would you lead me with something like a digital lesson? That's why would you feed me that softball? So when is her first guest?
Her first student is 10 a.m. this morning.
Oh, so is she sound asleep, do you think?
No, I woke her up. We found this great old this channel that just shows old 80s sitcoms, Facts of Life,
things
Benson.
Like that. Yeah.
So we've been obsessed with that, and she's currently watching that and trying to sleep for another hour, I believe.
Wait. She's watching that instead of me? Now, how do you know? How do I put this delicately? How do you know that she's not looking at me and enjoying herself in there?
Bob, come on.
I'm just saying, having lunch, breakfast, where was I going? All righty. There's not much in the world of sports. They've moved the Olympics, so we've got to talk about any number of things. Now, your town...
No, I just heard that Major League Baseball wants to start July 4th, but you just keep hearing the start dates, and who knows? They're just... They're just writing articles for the sake of it. They've got nothing else to do. Who knows what the world's going to look like July 4th,
Oh, who knows?
So
maybe in December we'll be singing Baseball's Roasting on the Open Fire.
I've actually heard them. I've heard discussion about the World Series being played on Christmas Day. I don't.
Oh my goodness. I would kind of like that. I don't know. Well, no, actually, I wouldn't.
It's just going to be such a cluster when everything gets back together. It's going to be like, Wimbledon, the Kentucky Derby, the World Series. Tomorrow, the football Sunday. Just everything's going to come shooting back. And
Hey,
it'll be pretty cool. I must say, I'm looking forward to
you
that.
can't have it all. There's only so much money to go around at one time, and you can't have the World Series, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, the NBA
You know
playoff.
what? If you ever aspired to be a cameraman in the sporting world, now would be the time to learn the craft because they are going to be looking for cameramen. I'm sure there's a guy that a quarter of his year is baseball, and then he jumps over to football. But it's going to be all.
That's
condensed.
nice to hear. When I started, when I switched from corporate to radio, I started to broadcasting. I started out in television, and I started out at the time when cameramen were really, really, really. They didn't treat them well. They got minimum wage. They came out in all kinds of terrible weather and they just weren't respected. Now the old time union guys are, because the union will kick ass. But good, because that's a profession that is an art. And those people are
absolutely
busting the gut, and I hope the more jobs for TV cameramen, the better. And those of us in radio know when you go out and you're on a press scrum, you even let them put a camera on your shoulder. They got tough, because they're trying to get a shot. And that's why whenever you look at a press scrum, folks, and you see people who are on their knees in front, those are usually the radio people who want to get out of the way of their colleagues. It can be collegiate. It can also be fight. You have to see people. There's a subtle war that goes on fighting to get your mic on a platform so that people can see it. You want to move your mic? No, put your mic. I don't want my mic. Anyway, the people don't need that inside baseball stuff. So now I wanted to ask you, and I've been meaning to ask you this for weeks, and I keep forgetting. I think you told me, did you watch that heavyweight fight last month?
I did. I did watch it.
Okay.
It was actually pretty entertaining.
Entertaining, yes, but I saw some clips of it. The skill level of the heavyweight division has dropped like a rock, though. I mean,
Yeah, it was mostly a lot of power punching, not much. They used to call it, what would they call it? The sweet science.
Yeah, well, now it's the fat science, too. It's just, the best fights are now in the The only problem with the welterweights is they don't punch hard enough to knock one another out, so they beat one another silly. They're bloody to a pulp. But the big guys don't get knocked out until they start getting up to the, I guess, light heavy or so, whatever it is. But I don't know. It's a sport I've always liked, but it's barbaric.
Why do you bring it up?
Why do I bring it up? Because I like the sport, and I like to see it. I wish it was run better. That's why.
I know. It used to be the best athletes. They went to... They tried boxing and baseball, and that's totally changed now. They all stray to football and basketball.
I'm sort of even glad why you brought it up. I'll tell you why I brought it up, because there's a deeper reason. One, I'm sorry about the decline in the sport, and it's been replaced by that other form of fighting, where it can be where unless they're in a real free flow, it can be very boring. It's like watching. God, please don't be upset, but college wrestling or paint dry until they get to punch or kicking one another. But the reason I bring it up is a lot of people in my life who know I'm not a very violent person say, "How could you like boxing?" Because anyone who's ever been an athlete knows that it is the ultimate in why people compete. Offense, defense, protecting yourself, speed, reflexes, stamina. It is the ultimate competition. That's why it's a metaphor for life. And I don't want to see people get brain damage. And I realize that makes me guilty of being, what's the right word, ambivalent but it really, anyone who does sports knows it's the ultimate sport. It absolutely is.
Every time ESPN Classic shows the third Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier fight, I watched that, and that's probably the most incredible sporting event I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, well, you weren't alive, and so please be kind to me. But in 1970 or 71, when he fought Frazier first, it was without a doubt, up until that date, the most, what's the right word, event. It was not just the event, it was the first time that rich and famous people always showed up in the sidebar of, sitting in the stands to watch fights and such. But you had Burt Lancaster. It was like the Tom Cruise of his day. He announced in the ring.
Yeah, I remember seeing Frank Sinatra taking pictures for, was it Life magazine?
And what you had to do,
Ringside.
yeah, I know it was huge. It was huge. And he lost that fight, and he got knocked down. And that's all when he actually became even more famous, Ali, because as he said when he went on TV the next day, he said his kinfolk in Africa felt that punch. How he got up off the floor, I don't know, but it was when there were guys like him, Frazier, Foreman, the guy they used to call the Eggcorn. There was a fight, and I forget the guy's name. Ernie Shavers, I think it was. He had a
Yeah,
fight.
I've actually met him. The Boxing Hall of Fame is
Yep.
in upstate New York, in Canastota, New York, which is very close to Syracuse. And I would go to the inductions, and I remember meeting Ernie
Oh
Shavers
my
when he was
God.
inducted. Met Ernie Shavers, Ken Norton.
Yep.
I met Joe Frazier. He was a very nice guy.
I've met Frazier, yeah. But he fought the Acorn, as he used to call it. Names for everybody. And it was the last two rounds were the most two exciting rounds. I mean, they may as well not have defended. It was like giving guys a bat. I hit you, you hit me. I hit you, you. And again, I know it sounds barbaric, folks, but if you've ever played a sport and you're up at the ninth inning, or you're in overtime, and it's your will and your ability to compete. Whether you approve of it or not, it's like nothing. As you can see, I was a fan. Broke my mother's mirror after the last Foreman fight he had. Did you know that? Did I tell you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my brother and I were huge Ali fans, and he was at the end. We thought the end of his career, and we thought that Foreman was going to kill him. I don't know. Did you ever see the fight when Foreman knocked down Frazier 6 times?
Yeah, I've seen all those fights on ESPN Classic.
He actually lifted him off his feet. So now he's
I
fighting
know.
Ali. And I said, but Tony, we have to go. We were there for the wins, and we went up to this place, the Walker Theater. And I was prepared to watch my guy lose and all fight. Oh, the rope-a-dope, beat up. And then he jumps off the ropes with the jabs, and then the combo, and knocks him down. I'm yelling and jumping in the aisles. So I go home, and I'm in the kitchen, and my mother had a nice mirror over the radiator, and I'm over there, and I'm look at me. I could have a jab like Ali, and I was closer than I thought. Wound up buying a mirror the next day, so. So you like it too. See, I'm glad because again, if there was a way to keep the brain injury out of it, I'd really love it because it is the ultimate sport in my view. I would have loved to learn how to do it.
Will you pay for the rematch? I
No.
think they've already set the date.
No, because there are middleweight matches. Some of my friends will buy, and I'll go see them. Like when Hopkins and Hearns were in their prime about 7, 8, 10 years ago. But I don't think they're good enough. They're not worth paying for, these guys, the heavyweights.
Just, I'll just put this out there. Just say you had a minion that worked for you that knew a website where you could watch all the events for free.
Yes.
Would you do that?
Sure, I would.
All right. Well, maybe you'll find a minion and he'll give you a website.
If the minion had nice cold beer or good or really nice bourbon and said, "Why don't you come over and we'll watch the fight?" I would probably go.
Maybe play a game of poker or two.
Yeah, I'm a worst card player in the world. I am a mark looking to be taken. I can't play cards. I mean, I get bored and I don't pay attention and it's ugly. But yes, I would. And I miss the days and 40 years ago when you sit down with a drink and smoking cigarettes and playing cards, and those were the days. Well, now they do it with cigars, though. I just died, be allergic. So what else is going on that you want to tell us about in the world of spurts?
In the world of, I was surprised that Tom Brady's new teammate, who had number 12, Chris Goodwin, just gave it away.
What do you mean?
Brady switched teams to Tampa Bay, obviously.
Yeah, but you said he did right. Mm-hmm.
And Brady, of course, his number is 12.
Oh, he did give it. He didn't even sell it, huh?
Just gave it away, it seems like, yeah. Figured be at least worth a nice sports car or something.
Yeah, or maybe get to take his wife out to dinner. Sorry, I digress.
A night out with Giselle.
Yeah, that's what I was figuring. You want to give me the jersey, huh? You can't. I'm just not. I worked here. I was here till very late last night, so my brain is a little shot. My guest, by the way, I'm not our guest. He's a part of the program. Jake Schaefer's normally in the studio, but he is in quarantine with the missus, who is in bed right now watching videos. So it's fine.
She is watching the 80s sitcom Growing Pains at the moment.
I never saw that one. So 80s.
No, Family Ties. Family Ties.
No, the
Michael J. Fox.
Oh yeah, Michael
the
J.
Michael J. Fox show.
When he plays a little right-wing nut. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But that's when
Exactly.
right-wing people weren't nuts. It was just right-wing people. But
Exactly.
it was before that they passed over, well, the extreme to the psychotic end of the register. But that's okay. In the interest of fairness, see, you weren't there. The 60s were worse. The left was as bad as the far right is now. So worse even. They were more violent. I move on. Do you think that we're really going to have any, that the football season will get started on time? And how do you feel about the new wild card games?
I am excited about the new playoff format. Actually, I do think the football season will start. I think they're going to. The craziest proposal I heard yesterday was they get 2 cruise ships. They put the Eastern Conference basketball. I'm talking about now. Eastern Conference basketball players, coaches, and maybe a family member, trainers, put all the players on one cruise ship, put the Western Conference on another cruise ship, and just build a court and get the playoffs going on 2 cruise ships. Totally quarantined.
Totally quarantined. Well, why not?
And it sounds great to me. I would watch it.
Well, so you would. Now, what about the XFL? Do you think this destroyed them?
Probably. Unfortunately, yes. But perfect excuse for the NFL to steal all their great ideas, innovative ideas.
I liked some of the innovative ideas they had. Now, let's go back to hockey. They right now will be getting ready for the playoffs. Do you think that they'll shorten the playoffs? Do you think that they'll have any playoffs to get in the playoffs? Or do you think that season is toast? I'm beginning to think it's toast.
The 7, I don't like that. Baseball, I do like best of 7, but if you could do best out of 3, I think that's so exciting. That's why I love March Madness. It's one and done. I think a best out of 3, which is what they'll probably do in hockey and basketball.
But not the finals. Would you do
maybe,
it even for the finals?
Yeah, I mean, best out of 5 for finals, you say?
No, I would leave it, say best out of 7. The other thing you run into is they need to make money. They need the games. But
exactly.
Yeah, I could live with best out of 3. But you're right. Some of the most exciting games have been one-game playoffs. Absolutely. Even in games I played in back in my own heyday, the most exciting game I ever played in, and I've won cups, but was a one-game playoff to make the playoffs. It was an extraordinary game, 5 overtime periods. It was exciting as all get all. Oh, most fun game I ever played in my life.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you get there, there's nothing more must-see TV than a Game 7 for anything. There it is. Everyone, all hands on deck. Anything goes.
Now, have you or your wife, Jake, have you guys followed any of these, I guess, I don't know how to explain them, online concerts that have been going on? And Elton John ran one.
My wife was very excited. Dave Matthews did one last week, and she was tuned in for that one. But I have not seen any online concerts or anything.
Okay, so when she's watching that, what is Jake doing?
I have a really good Lego set that I've been working on. Huge one, and it hurts my brain, and I cannot figure it out, but it's a lot of fun.
I'm just calling a guest now who's on. I think he forgot he's on, and I'm following up. So, all right, before we go, I want your take on comedy. Hey, you're on in 2 minutes. You can call, brother. Bye-bye. What's your take on the state of comedy today? I'm concerned that political correctness is going to destroy it. Now,
honestly, Bob, I couldn't name any new comedians or... I just don't really pay attention to it. My wife was interested in going to see Adam Sandler, and I had really no interest in that. And some of my family went and saw Jerry Seinfeld in the city a couple of months ago, but I don't know. I just don't really keep up with
when you
comedy.
left it, that was that. That's very, very interesting, and I guess for another day. Jake, thank you very much. Go in and check on your wife. I bet you she's watching pictures of me now and throwing up intermittently. Thank you very, very much. Jake Schaefer, everybody. We'll be talking with him again tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Ivar Heiden's coming up, as I'm reminding my guest. You know what's happening, by the way? So many people are home and sleeping later than they normally do, that I've found it necessary to occasionally tweak them. But it is time to take a look at things, the weather, and not the weather completely, because Eli Hyde is going to be calling in a moment. We want to see how he is doing. It's Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. It's 40. Look out. It's sunny. Now, you got a balancing act. I see a lot of people out with bikes, and bikes are good, because you can maintain distancing and get your exercise. For those of you who are hockey players, what are you going to do to stay in shape? Do what I do. Go get your inlines, go get your quads, whatever skates you use that allow you to skate on asphalt or to skate in parks. Now, it's funny, they close all the parks where outdoor rinks are, but they can't exactly go and hunt everybody down. Go find a parking lot, bring your inlines, go find a jogging trail. But not the obviously dirt ones, okay? You can skate. There's always a parking lot. There's always a place to get out. Enjoy the day. Bring a sandwich, sit by yourself, and if it's with your wife, lover, farm animal, whatever, well, you can do that too. All righty, we need to go straight ahead now. A man who's with us every week at this time. He is a city councilman from New Rochelle here in District 4. And we will start off first by asking him how he is, and then how quiet it is where he hangs his hat. Good morning, Ivar Heiden. Ivar, did I hang up too soon?
No, it's not Ivar.
Oh, Anthony, I'm sorry. I've got some time, but you know what? Here, let me take his call, and then I'll call you. Are you on the road or you home?
I'm on the with the cell phone's a cell phone. No problem. I have hands free.
Okay, I'll give you a buzz back. Thanks. I got to get to him. Okay, let's do that. Good. I've already introduced you. Good morning, Ivar Heiden. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Well, you know what it is. Because of the virus, I am a one-man show. Producer, electronic man, phone person, reminder, newsman, and chief antiseptic agent in this. I'm sealed in here.
That's how many people at the train station this morning?
Actually, I saw more. I think I saw about 5 already.
Well,
at 8:30, it's coming up on 8. I saw 5, but generally it's me, the guard, and this almost heroic guy who cleans up.
Yeah.
Most of the people going to work are women. Well, I'm just giving you a little report. The larger number of them are African American. And that's about it. And that's just how it drifts. And you get the occasional, and I'm only mentioning color because I think it's important. I think that people, maybe they're nurses or whatever, but we're in a very diverse part of the neighborhood. But still, we have people, 1,500 cars here from all over the city. Whatever it says, apropos of nothing, but it's just an observation. Women are out. Maybe they need their jobs. I don't know whichever folks. I'm not going.
Yeah, no. I do think the information is interesting and potentially valuable. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know about how the world works.
Right. And I know the nursing profession. Obviously, most are women, so that's just an assumption.
Yeah, and home health care also are mostly. Yeah.
Now, how are you? Right. How is your family? Have you been protected from it?
Yeah. Well, so far all is well. I do have a stepson who should probably be tested soon. He was in close contact with a coworker who developed COVID-19. So we're hopeful that he hasn't gotten it, but he's been feeling kind of a little under the weather. But he's younger, and that's hopeful. So,
well,
we shall see how it goes, but apart from that, everybody else seems to be fine.
I'm glad to hear that. I have a friend, and this is spooky. One of the guys I play hockey with, but this guy is one of, every once in a while you run into a guy who's like a super athlete. The guy's
Hmm.
6'2", the girls are like this, 6'1", maybe 195 pounds, very, very in shape. Hasn't smoked a cigarette in his life. The best older hockey player probably around. And a week ago, I'm talking to him on a Saturday. Yeah, I'm working from home, but I'm also redoing the basement. 3 days later, I got it. 2 days later, he could barely talk. 3 days later, I'm not any better. And last night, I found out he's in the hospital with pneumonia. So it just strikes some people quickly.
Yeah, and why
violently.
and why and when is very difficult to understand. Also, this is. I'm sure in the end we will get all the data and it'll get figured out. But this is it's very random, and I don't quite get that. I really don't. And obviously I'm not a doctor of scientist, but it seems random, and it seems to. You're right. It seems to affect some people. You'd really be shocked that it would affect, and I think that's very good. A very good reason to tell young people in particular that they have to take this seriously.
And to be careful. Well, I did a primer the other day for folks on the virus. And do you know how many how tiny they are, and that can show you how ubiquitous they are? They're everywhere, and probably by the gazillions. Do you know how many of those viruses can fit on the head of a pin?
I think it was something like 10,000 or whatever,
40
right?
million.
Or was it more? Really?
We're doomed if you. No, in other words, but the whole. The
No,
thing
I got it.
about nature is that we will. I believe it's 40 million. I got it here. The thing about nature, though, is that normally we have immunities. We've been exposed to these things, but the whole term novel, the virus never existed before, so people don't have
Right.
any immunity to it. Now, did you see? It was kind of interesting. The fine folks, the people who had tested positive up in Temple, I'm sorry, not Temple, Israel, Young Israel, they are now giving blood to help out. That's 45.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I had heard, the last thing I had heard is that they were, they had to get 2 negative tests in order to be released from quarantine.
Yeah, they dropped that. That was creating a political problem and a real
Did
problem.
they drop that?
Yeah, they did drop that. I mean, you were supposed to 14 days. You had it, you can go. You get a negative test, you go. No, they stopped with 2 negative tests. They're not doing that anymore.
See, I hadn't heard that, Bob. That's interesting because the whole thing was so bizarre. The other thing is I still don't understand what is happening with testing across the board, and it's something that I'm working on trying to find out. I have gotten constituent reports of all different kinds about how they're being told they can go over to Glen Island and get tested. Some people just drive up and get tested. Other people are turned away. Same thing over here at Montefiore. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to who's getting tested and who's not getting tested. And I'm trying to figure this out, trying to get some kind of codified response as, what is exactly going on with this. And I can't seem to find out very much about the, information. So I'm going to be working on that today. There's, this is curious. Also, the 15-minute test, when is that going to be delivered? Where is that going to be delivered? Because the testing is critical. We need to find out exactly what's going on and what population has it. The thing I don't understand, though, is if you get a test, does that tell you if you've had it already?
No, it does not.
Is it a test based
That's
on
a different
antibodies,
test. That's
or
a blood
not?
test. That's a blood test to see if you have antibodies.
So let's assume, and I'm sure that this is probably true, that there are tons of people that have had it who are asymptomatic, right? Who've been walking around with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when are we going to find out who they are? Because those are people also that are going to have antibodies.
But we won't know. We won't know. Yes, but until we test everyone. In fact, one of the things, and I'm not turning to this point of view, but we must be fair and consider all this. One of the things that people who think the nation is overreacting will tell you is that if we actually had been successful at testing everyone, we might find out that it's a very small percentage of people who are getting sick. But they're all getting sick at the same time. I mean, we're not imagining the run on hospitals.
Right, of course not.
But you know what? It reminds me something that I've been saying ever since I got on the air, which is the most important thing in America, not done well anymore, is middle management. And whether it's elected officials who are made executives because they help somebody get elected, that's one problem. And then under them, you have lifelong bureaucrats who get jobs because they took a test, not because they could manage. And so a lot of this is just bad management. I loved The greatest line that was ever uttered by Napoleon, and again, I'm paraphrasing it, was, "It's better to attribute things that go wrong to incompetence rather than to malice." And that's why we don't, one on one hand doesn't know what the other one is doing. And you ever see those people we put in charge on both sides? This guy ran my campaign, and now I'm putting him in charge of health and human services. Really?
Yeah, right.
Really?
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's exactly what happens, and in this administration, I think more than any other, and certainly I'm sure it's happened in all administrations. But the people around our current president are just astonishing, suck up cronies, and it is absolutely disgusting to watch. Absolutely disgusting to watch his press conferences. But that's me. I mean, there's still plenty of people apparently who think he's doing a wonderful job, and if they believe that, they believe that.
Well, and that is their right and their
Of
choice.
course.
Now, what about here in the city? Are you folks continuing with your meetings, and are you
We're
getting any
having
special information
we're
from
having
City Hall?
meetings telephonically. We had a city council meeting last Friday, as a matter of fact. Very brief. There was some housekeeping issues that by law we had to deal with before, they were time sensitive. Not anything of great importance, but important. Things like continuing the STAR exemption for senior citizens for their taxes, things like that were on timelines that we had to deal with. And they're important issues. So we did have a telephonic meeting, which was the second one that we've done, which is a bit bizarre. I find them very uncomfortable, really, because I really do like interacting with my colleagues.
Well, you're not supposed to be sitting
looking at them, and I like talking, across the table.
Well, you're not supposed to be sitting in them naked, sitting home drinking a beer, though, either. Just warning you.
Yeah, no, that's true, but it still feels, I don't know, it feels very disconnected.
You get used to those in corporate America, but yeah,
No, I know.
Politics shouldn't be that way. But people should have access to it.
We haven't done video conferencing yet. I think I understand it's some difficulty getting bandwidth sufficient for this kind of thing. And some other phone is going off here.
Well, I wouldn't.
And hold on one second.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, and what else? Things like that. And but we're in touch all the time. I'm on with the mayor quite a bit, with the city manager. The city is functioning. I have to, a shout out again to our people here.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of the garbage guys the other day.
Yeah.
We're still on a full garbage collection schedule, and these guys go around and everywhere and handle all of everybody's waste.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a lot more garbage now because people are home and eating.
Well, the boxes, the paper accumulation is unbelievable because everything's being shipped. But these guys do an admirable job. They always have. But now they're out there. They're kind of like frontline guys now. We have police and firefighters who have tested positive, who are out there. Our firefighters still are the first responders. When you make a 911 call in New Rochelle, they often get there before the ambulances. They have to deal with this. And our police department, and I think they're doing a terrific job, both of them. One of my stepsons works for the county, and he works in the what we used to be called the sewer department, and one of the sewage treatment plants in Yonkers. Mm-hmm. And he and his crew are in there working all
Absolutely.
the time.
Yeah.
It's scary to think about.
I was talking this morning.
But these people are out there and they're doing their jobs, and without them, you can't flush your toilet. This is not something to take lightly.
Well, they put out a missive today, not just they, but the EPA. A lot of people are washing their, I'm not talking about bathroom wipes or toilet paper, but they're flushing their, those other larger handy wipes that you disinfect with down the toilet, and they're gumming up all the sewer works. Becoming a big problem. Last night, it's interesting. We did a little bit this morning. Every restaurant that I can think of, I've been talking about a little bit. No charge, not asking for anything. Trying to remind people that they're there and to pick up food and maybe buy a gift.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm very concerned about. There are a lot of small businesses. Obviously, mine is closed.
That's why I was here last night. I'm dialing for dollars last night and planning for that. We're all going to die. All of us in small businesses are going to die. The question is, how do we come back to life at at some point.
Yeah, it's true, and it's really unfortunate. It hurts an awful lot of people, particularly low wage workers, especially in the restaurant business. There's so many people involved in that. I feel terrible for a lot of these people. I know a lot of them in the downtown area put their life savings into this kind of thing, and to watch it go down the tubes is sad. We don't know yet how this government program is going to play out. How the $2 trillion bailout is supposed to help.
Well, it's pretty
individual
easy
small business.
there's
a process.
Yeah, there is. It's easy,
if
I may. It's easy to apply, relatively easy for the 10,000, the quickie loan. It's pretty easy to apply. The question is, will they approve it? But you should know that if you need 10 right away.
I do think though that there's. Well, first of all, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. We'll see how easy it is for for people. Because bureaucracy is bureaucracy.
Yeah, no kidding.
And,
Did you see one of the?
They're also dealing with a tremendous number of applications, but you wonder if it gets bogged down, and I'm curious about that myself. And I know people who are doing this, and I'm just curious to see how they're.
Well, it's already happened. A lot of state government workers didn't get paid this week because of the fight over the budget. That kind of went under the radar. We did that story yesterday and again this morning. So it's crazy. Well, listen, thank you for making time. Please take care of yourself.
No, listen, Bob, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, and I still feel positive. We're going to come out of this at the other end, and we're going to, we have ways, and we will continue to move forward and succeed in what we're trying to do, and we're going to do everything we can here in Rochelle to help everyone. Everybody personally and also local business. I'm very proud of our food distribution, and nobody's going hungry, and I'm very hopeful about things going forward.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for making time for us, and we'll talk to you soon. Yvonne Hyden, everybody, District 4 here in New Rochelle. That should be our next guest. Also, we want to reach out. Anthony tried to get on later, and we will get him on. I do believe, if I've organized this right, that this is another local newsman that does a good job. Well, does a very good job. Covers Mount Vernon like a glove. Cares about Westchester entire. He is the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine with his own signature hello. Good morning, A.J. Woodson.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Man, I like that. You should tape that on your. That's because it's like warm and friendly. And how you doing? How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Just trying to stay safe. Starting to get a little cabin fever, but at least cabin fever won't kill you. So I guess
No, and I'm glad it wasn't a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, and people knew it because I said it on the air to you. A couple of years ago, you had some health issues. I'm glad this isn't then for you.
I'm glad it is too, and I'm also glad my mom passed going on 6 years in May, and she was in the hospital and the nursing homes and stuff. I'm glad that this is not that time, because then I wouldn't even be able to be there with her. So I was just thinking about that the other day too.
Yeah, well, I've got a very close friend. You probably hear me talk about him, who's in a nursing home, veterans nursing home, and I can't see him. But I call him every day and curse him and yell at him and
right.
And send him stuff in the mail. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to show your affection for people you care about when they're in this situation. Moving on to Mount Vernon, you guys, I got my list here. Mount Vernon is third in the list, and it's not a good list to be on. 269 people. We had your mayor on yesterday, and boy, did we have some interesting conversations about the controller. But let's start with the hospital first. And do you think that this crisis may have the silver lining of helping out that situation, of preserving it?
Well, we're still trying to figure out what's going on with the hospital. They actually have a triage type tent in the where the ambulances drive in to emergency. I was told, even though we had seen no proof of it, and I talked to the mayor Sunday night, and there's no confirmation that they're going to use that for testing. They have not made the testing site at Mount Vernon. I was on News 12 last week, and before I was on, they were talking about a spot, a triage tent that they have for testing in Yonkers.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what they're doing. I know an elected official whose family member was showing signs went to the hospital, to Mount Vernon Hospital, and then they let the person go, and then the ambulance had to take it back to Mount Vernon Hospital. They released the person again, and then they went to Lawrence Hospital where they're being treated.
Wow. Well, that's crazy. That's just
And that's the family.
crazy.
That's the family member, the sister of the elected official in Mount Vernon. So
What about? I was shocked. Excuse me. I asked the mayor this directly because at one point she tried to impose an earlier curfew than did the state and the nation. And of course,
Right.
she has to follow the governor's edict. But I did ask her, if you had the druthers and the authority, would you tighten it? And she said she would, that she was, and these are my words, but essentially she was disappointed that there were still people hanging out on the street corners playing dice and such like that. Why do you think that's happening? Are people not getting the memo?
Well, I mean, some people, especially younger people, think they're invulnerable still because, the president and others in the beginning were saying that, younger people have less to worry about, older people are going to catch it. Younger people are more healthy. They actually explained it wrong. Older people it will affect older people a lot worse.
Oh, yeah, well, that's the whole point.
Right, but it did never say that it wouldn't affect young people, but I think that was lost in translation, where a lot of young people, a lot of these millennials do not think that they can get it. And I've had conversations with, like, local people and people in my internal circle, and, relatives of people in my internal circle, like, the importance of them staying in the house. I had District Attorney Scarpino on this Sunday, and one of the questions I asked, a lot of the district attorneys are releasing inmates who have like less than 6 months to go in their sentence, releasing them early. But one of the things, while Westchester, let me just say, the Westchester DA has not made a decision to do that, but other DAs have. So we asked them about that, and one of the things we were concerned about was, are they being tested before they leave? And just think about it, if people it's hard to keep people from being outside now. Someone who has been locked up for a while, and they just got their freedom a little bit early. Staying in the house might be like almost being locked up again almost, so they might want to, tempt the waters and be out in the street and be seen, just that might be tempting for them. That, we painted that picture Sunday when I was talking to Scarpino on the phone.
Very, very interesting. Well, we shall see how that plays out. Hey, a couple of other issues in Mount Vernon, and then I'm going to share an anecdote with you because of the very reason your magazine exists. But first, I asked her about the controller, and that plot just thickens now. There was the story that there aren't enough firemen, there aren't money to hire firemen, and that the controller is basically wresting control of the city from the mayor, or trying to. Is this ever going to come to a head? I understand that they're trying to have meetings now, even virtual meetings with the controller to deal with this. Is she totally off the reservation, or are we only getting one side of it?
Well, the lack of, this fireman issue has been an issue since Ernie Davis.
Yep.
Starting with Councilman Richard Thomas, fighting for more firefighters. Well, the firefighters were fighting for more firefighters, and the mayor Ernie Davis wouldn't add any more. And Yonkers Fire Department was making claims that we were abused of Mount Vernon. The city of Mount Vernon was abusing the mutual aid, having the other firefighters come from outside of Mount Vernon to help, including Yonkers and Rochelle, and some big fires, people all the way from White Plains. And that was that big issue. So the firefighter issue and not having enough firefighters, that fight has been going on before Richard Thomas was mayor. So, I just wanted to put that in perspective.
You just
Um,
did. But why is it that a controller can have enough power to disrupt so much government, and even in one case, help bring about the downfall of a mayor? I mean, this is as
and
close to anarchy as you're ever going to get.
I do want to say, and then when Richard Thomas became mayor, in the work session meeting, which happens like just before the day or two before the city council meeting, Mayor Thomas, with his administration, his whole his cabinet, we called it, which included Sean Patterson Howard, came into the city council asking for a certain number of firefighters, because I think Ernie had canceled the class or whatever, and the numbers he wanted, the city council and the controller, Maureen Walker, broke down how they did not have enough money in the budget to bring in the number that he wanted, and then that was a big issue. So that this issue, again, just to put the firefighter thing in perspective, predates Deborah Reynolds. Like, this has been an ongoing issue every year, about the need for more firefighters, the no money in the budget to pay for more firefighters. Everybody using this as a political football. Oh, they just don't want to, Richard Thomas used to make press conferences. They're playing politics with your safety. They don't want to give you what So this fight, I just want to say, and this is not to defend Deborah Reynolds.
No, but you know what?
This is an ongoing fight.
No, but if I may, and this is really important, AJ, because you and I strive to do the same stuff. If it does defend Deborah Reynolds, it should. I mean, she needs to be heard too, and her point of view needs to be looked at. So I applaud you for doing that. It ain't easy. I don't hear you sniffling, do I?
No, just real quick. That was just I just sneezed earlier.
Oh, okay. No, I just don't want you to be sick. AJ Woodson,
I'm
editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine, is with us. And she also, and she said that the controller is saying that they're not playing with a legitimate budget anymore, even though it had been approved.
There's the whole fight that, again, that also predates this controller and this mayor.
It's like deja vu all over again.
Going back to when Black Westchester first started in 2014, this was the Mayor Davis Maureen Walker conversation every year, and then Richard Thomas used to come on your show as a councilman, talk about Maureen won't do this, all the same things. So on both sides, I think there's a lot to be said on both sides. Like, this has been an ongoing fight.
Well, it also
same articles.
I'm sorry. Doesn't it tell us that the charter needs to be revised to make to clarify responsibilities? It's just something wrong that this can happen every administration.
I definitely believe that one thing that came out of the Richard Thomas administration was he definitely exposed several loopholes and things that may need to be updated in this charter, which is why they had, even if it might have been only in name only, this charter revision committee or whatever it was that, I don't think much came out of it. I don't think any changes were made as of yet. Maybe Mayor Patterson Howard will revisit that in the new city council and all that. But the charter is definitely outdated. I mean, there definitely is several loopholes that need to be addressed, and that's just across the board.
AJ Woodson,
they just can't agree. They can't agree on which ones and how to do it. How to go about doing it.
They can't agree on what time of day it is. It seems. What stories are at the top of your queue? And then I have an interesting item to pitch you. A very interesting item.
Well, our biggest story again was the Anthony Scarpino, district attorney interview. It was his first interview ever on People Before Politics, and he came reluctantly. He really did not want to come.
Why?
Damon has been very, very publicly critical of him, and I have in the paper and in print as well, critiquing his job. I think, he thought it was going to be, baptism by fire or whatever. So, but his opponent came on and had a great interview,
Yeah,
and I always try to give both candidates equal
sure.
time.
Yeah,
So
as we did
eventually,
too. Mm-hmm.
he came on, and the station wasn't open, so we had to do it via the online thing, and
Mm-hmm.
so he escaped having to sit across from me in the studio situation, but he did come on. We had some technical difficulties, but it was it's the talk of the county. Some of the things we talked about, the bad cop list. We talked about.
Sure.
He said that he was ahead of the bail reform and making these adjustments a year before, and there was just a couple of things that our listeners did not think he was being forthright and truthful about. So they're still sharing this video all over the place, and that's what the big talk has been about right now.
You know what's been interesting about it? Well, you got into issues with him. What it's a concern I have. I'm not don't have horses in the race, as you do not officially at any rate. The only issue I had with now Rocha was terrific and clearly very qualified, but she's clearly running against Donald Trump. And that's the one big distinction that I would make. So kudos to you for getting into the local issues.
Right. Well, no, we and I talked to her when I had her on the show. We discussed the local issues because one of my biggest things, and we said that before she came on, before we knew her name. I had Kenneth Chamberlain on, and we were also talking about things that our district attorney's office is not doing and has not been doing since before Janet DeFiore, just in certain cases that they won't cover and stuff. And we were all saying, we want to see what she was about. And, any candidates running for an office in Westchester that talks too much about Donald Trump, I have a problem with as well. If that was the case, because the district attorney's office or any of these local positions, mayor or whatever, they have no authority to do anything about Donald Trump. Like at least when we had Tish James on, she can do certain things about Donald Trump, in New York, but there's nothing that you can do. He probably don't have property in Westchester, so there's really nothing you can do.
No,
about
you're
him.
Absolutely right, AJ.
So we wanted to, but we
good
got
for you.
on
Excellent.
Specific
yeah,
issues
because we did that too here.
Criminal justice reform and particular things. She couldn't talk about particular cases, but we gave her, we talked about, and we let her know, the things that she is saying. You have to understand that the people were told this by her predecessor when he was running as well. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
The city has the county, and especially the city of Marrone, has heard all of this before, and they're a little disappointed that they didn't get what they were sold. So you know what I'm saying? You understand you're fighting against that. So
absolutely.
We definitely let her know that. And brought that to her. Made her speak to that. So
I got something that's anecdotal, and I tell you from the bottom of my heart that this is not patronizing. And you could, if people think that, well, they will. But I'm going to go there anyway. Your magazine, Black Westchester Magazine, as you say, that newspaper from the black point of view, but also it's not you. I think you cover everything, and you cover white, black, green, purple, but there is a community that hasn't always had a voice, and you make sure that they do. I've observed something that someone in your community is better, and when I say your community, in the news community, but also in a city that is 90% black or 80% black, and people who, like Damon and yourself, who have a civil rights bent as well. Here's the observation. And again, this is by no means patronizing, and I hope you won't infer it that it is. I am sitting here in this train station now every day, locked in my room with the door open. You've been here. This is a generalization, but I can say now, after the door being closed almost 2 weeks and a very quiet train station, 70% of the people who still come to the train station are black, African American, that was redundant, of course, African American women. What do you make of that? The nursing community, economics, or maybe it could be apropos of nothing, but I had to mention it. It's just, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, like anybody else who does news, why is that? Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't want to make a generalization.
No, I understand, but
One could be economics.
I thought of that.
I did see a report that more African Americans, let's put it this way, more middle class white people or non African American, non Hispanic
Sure.
people
No, I get it.
were more prepared financially to withstand something like this.
I got
And
that.
a lot, and not all African Americans, because there are some that are financially in that category as well, but a great amount of them um, need to be. They need to continue that check coming in. They can't afford to be out of work or a certain amount of time, or just take time off, a bulk time like that, and still be able to pay bills. Today being April 1st, a lot of people, even if the eviction thing is supposed to be, you're not supposed to be evicted or whatever for 90 days or whatever that is supposed to be. A lot of people are not sure how they're paying their rent today, and this is the first one, since this whole thing. And there's a lot of people not sure how they're paying. I've heard a lot of people, they don't know how they're paying their rent, their utilities, and everything today. So they are, even when they're asking people to stay home, some of them have those positions where they can still work, and they're trying to get as much overtime and trying to get as many hours as they can get to.
Hey, I put out a call last night for other radio stations. A lot of radio stations have people not going to work. You need somebody to cover a story, I'll cover it. But what I've also noticed, and it's just an observation, some are wearing scrubs. I don't know, and you would know this better than I, perhaps, is the nursing profession has been a profession of, I think, that a lot of black women have been a part of. I don't know that that's true statistically, but again, it's just observation.
Hispanic women, other Caribbean, other than American black, Caribbean, one of the various countries. All of those make up a lot of the nursing. Those are jobs
because that could explain it too. Yeah,
those are jobs you can get. And David and I always talked about, as far as for men, back in the days, it was General Motors and the Westchester County Department of Corrections that created the African American middle class. Because those are jobs that you could get. At the time, both jobs were jobs you could get with a high school diploma, and one of them with a GED. And on those, you could actually make a career out of it and support your family. So that when General Motors closed, and it severely helped eliminate a lot of the middle class. There was, there was poor and poorer.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding.
So corrections, and a lot of people do not want to. A lot of African Americans, Hispanics do not want to go into law enforcement. Like Damon is in corrections, and his wife is a Mount Vernon police detective, and neither one of their children want to have anything to do with law enforcement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's interesting. But do me a favor, again, and I hope you didn't view it as patronizing, but talk with Damon, talk to other people in the community, because it's an observation that, on one hand, people are going to look at it as, perhaps some people will look at it as an economic issue, but in other issues, it may be a bit of a nice thing to say that we got people out there who are nurses that are going to work every day to help others. But that is an observation. Again, I'm here every day. I mean, you can't miss it where I sit.
Right.
I just thought that was noteworthy, and that you folks could give it a chat.
If you go to, my mother passed 6 years ago, and I spent a lot of time the months before that in New Hospital, Bronx, Montefiore, Mount Vernon Hospital, Wahlberg, and I think Dumont or whatever the home is over there in New Rochelle.
But United Hebrew, you got several of them.
But I spent time in each of those with my
Willow
mother,
Towers,
and the great makeup of them. Not that there aren't white nurses. There were a lot of black. There was a lot of Latino. There were a lot of Caribbean.
And it's a great profession. I know, but there are a couple of places. There are a lot of Caribbean folks who work in the home health care too. Listen, I got to go and get ready for my next guest. But thanks. But by the way, I'm going to be reaching out to Damon. I want to get him to come on and talk about what it's like in the jails, et cetera, et cetera. And
yes,
how to
he'll
protect people.
love that. He's talking about that wherever he can talk about that.
Oh no, I'm going to give him 30 minutes. I'm just going to find him.
They're not being tested, and,
Nope.
and officers are going out, and then him and other officers are working overtime. And if you have an inmate that's been in there for 6 months or more, the inmate didn't bring it in, so it's the officers bringing it in, and they're not being tested.
Right. I know. I'm worried about them. So, and I'm worried about the inmates too. They're human beings. So,
yeah.
Did I say beans?
yeah. So my prayer to all first responders, medical workers, first responders, delivery drivers, supermarket workers, all of those people who are still performing those duties and have to face the public every day and doing it. While I'm holed up in my room and not leaving the house and not talking to person face to face right now.
No, but listen, you take care of yourself, all right? One of the good people I get to work with, folks, A.J. Woodson. Thank you so very much, A.J. Woodson, everybody. We're going to try and get Anthony in for a couple before we go to. He's on the road, and I hope he may be trying to see his dad. And he wanted to get in, and I really want to try and get him. I saved 5 minutes. Somebody tries to get on the air, we try and get back to them, folks, if we can. And it is 9 o'clock, 9:05. We go to Harlan Ullman. We have much to talk about today, obviously. Hey, Anthony, hold on. This is Radio Westchester. Folks, regular caller, contributor to the radio station. Welcome, Anthony. Thanks for taking our call. Is everything okay? You're out and about.
Unfortunately, my wife still has to work every other day. She's considered essential services, heating oil. Even if you don't heat with oil, a lot of people have hot water with oil. So, and her boss has been very gracious in that they're rotating the office staff, one day on, one day off, but they're still maintaining their full paycheck. So,
well, tell her to be careful. Good grief! And when she comes home at the front door, spray her and wash her hands.
Well, she doesn't deal with the public face to face. She's in the office, and the office is closed and locked. You can't come up actually into the office unless you call first, and they come let you in. And that's a very rare occasion. But yeah, I don't want her chancing, going to get gasoline for the vehicles. So.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, I got to remember whenever I do to wear a glove. Actually, I wash my hands right away, and then you got to key in your numbers if you don't use cash.
You got to wear the gloves when you make sure when you get out of the car that you have the hand sanitizer open. I leave the door open with the hand sanitizer in the armrest. So once the gloves come off, the hand sanitizer goes on before my hands touch anything else.
Wow, well, that's good. I'm glad, because when I heard you were out when you called him before and I had a guest lined up, I was saying, boy, I hope everything is okay. How is your stepdad doing?
He's doing okay. He came down, unfortunately, with shingles.
Oh, God.
But, thank God it's not a, terribly severe case, and the medication seems to be responding to the medication. But as you know, I'm having a little problem with the rules that the state has put in place when it comes to nursing homes.
Yes, I know. And hopefully you'll be able to complete that.
The reason I called is, number one, I want to be fair. I want to give credit to Joe Biden.
Well, you always do.
Yesterday or the day before, I forget which day it was, he was asked by a reporter or an interview or whatever, do you think that the president has blood on his hands from his response?
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. And he responded, that's a bit over the top.
Well, good for him.
Now, he kind of saved face. He didn't really say, you're out of your mind even asking that question. But in fairness to him, like I said, he didn't jump on the bandwagon, which a lot of other Democrats and, public officials have done.
I think you describe it best, the people that are haters.
Yeah, well, ridiculous. I mean, they're on both sides, Bob.
I know, and we both always say that. Yes, go ahead, sir.
And that's the other reason I called, because this morning when you had your initial guest who's, suffering from Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, I try to push him back a little bit today, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, but you guys always talk about the right wing nuts, and then just give a little bit of a backhand to the Democrats, or I shouldn't say Democrats,
the left wing nuts,
loony liberals, whatever term you want to put on extreme left, okay, by saying it happens on the left too. But I never hear you guys start off with chastising them by saying, hey, remember, Bob, you said you would trust this deplorable piece of what in the bottom of the basket that's irredeemable with your grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, sometimes I'd like you guys to maybe just, flip it around.
Well, but
chastise.
Yes, you're right.
And just backhand.
But do not call yourself a deplorable bottom of the barrel. I will not accept that.
I don't.
No.
Generalize.
No.
As the loony left.
No. Look, I think your criticism is fair. But what I want to say is, because that's what's in the news. It's like, I know, as I said today, a lot of the people, the liberals in our school system, must want to shoot me. I'm surprised they don't have a sniper headed at me right now. No, I think your thing is fair, but I think you're going to be careful about the way you characterize yourself, and you don't need me to defend you. You can be a pain in the ass.
No, I'm not. Listen,
no. Let me finish.
That's the way that people like myself who have supported Trump.
Yes, but
you know
what? Yes, but you'll say, yeah, but you'll even no. No, you will even say, look, he shouldn't say this, he shouldn't do that. It wasn't my first choice. The liberals, you give way. You're not a loony right wing nut. I hate the loonies on both sides, and when you're right, I need to remind people once in a while the AOC stuff and everything else and as I often say, you and I lived through it. The far left in the '60s is worse than anything we ever see today. They were blowing up buildings.
Let's deal with facts. And I know everybody can bend the facts. I understand that. Okay, but they talk about the president's delayed response. Okay, causing us to be in the situation we're in. He put the ban on China flights coming in right away.
I know he did.
And let's remember something else. Maybe if he wasn't so focused on having to defend himself for an impeachment process that was an absolute sham, in my opinion, okay? Because and if for no other reason, then the outcome was already determined before it even started.
If I may, not only do I not agree, I do agree with you on this. Not that it should be a get out of jail totally free card, but that is absolutely true. And I used to say that during the Clinton era, although his impeachment again, I still would have impeached him because I think the people needed to know. But I do think that the way we attack presidents and the way we go through these impeachments and investigations, of course it distracts them. They're fighting for their lives. And I think that is a fair thing. But as you know,
But Bob, not only was he distracted, the three branches of government were distracted because everybody was so entrenched, and they figured this was off in China.
Hey, listen, I gotta go, but listen, I just want to mention something else to your point. Everybody agrees that Cuomo's been doing a pretty decent job here, but he forgot to pay his state workers. They didn't get paid.
Just give me 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Because it's the World Health Organization, who first came out and said that this virus doesn't appear to be transmitted from humans to humans.
That is absolutely true. And that is my guest. I got to run, but thank you, Anthony. Sorry to get to you so late. I'm getting to my guest late, running a bit late today. But being late with this guest is never a problem because we'll keep him as long as we can. He is, of course, Harlan Ullman. I read his column yesterday. It was terrific. We'll talk about it in UPI. Internationally renowned national security expert. He advises governments. He advises NATO, the Atlantic Council, on which he sits and advises. He's a consultant to government. He's been a destroyer commander. He has been a commander on swift boats in Vietnam, and he is, as you know, an author as well, working on a new book. His most recent, though, A Handful of Bullets, How America Loses the Wars It Starts. I can go on, but it's one of my favorite hours every week in the long form. Please welcome Harlan Ullman. Good morning, Harlan.
Morning, Robert. How you doing?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you. I look forward to your wisdom. That was some column you wrote yesterday. Why don't you tell people about it? And then you don't give it totally away. We can have them go to UPI and check it out. But what was the thrust of your column yesterday? Tell people about it.
Well, I'm going to have to give it away, Bob, because the title of the column was "Let Them Eat Cake."
Oh yeah.
For those,
what did you call it? Brielle or brioche?
brioche.
Yeah, brioche. Right. Yeah.
And the historical precedent is that when Marie Antoinette, who was married to King Louis XVI of France, just before the French Revolution of 1789, was told that her people were so poor that they could not afford bread, and she said, or was attributive saying she didn't. But the attribution was, well, let them eat cake. Actually, she said brioche. And looking at what's happening in the White House, the president has become so laid back on this that he's giving the appearance of being Marie Antoinette of let them eat cake. Namely, if we can just only have 200,000 Americans die as about 2 million, think about all the lives we'd save. That is an absolutely wrong thing to say. It is not only arrogant, it is uncaring, and it's dangerous. But then I go on in the column to talk about the Vietnam War in a book written about Vietnam by a British journalist and historian, Sir Max Hastings, who is quite famously accomplished, called Vietnam, the Tragic Epic 1945 to 1975, in which he fillets governments in Paris, in Washington, and Saigon for abusing the truth in waging the Vietnam War. And the parallel between Vietnam and today, if we abuse the truth as badly as we did during the Vietnam War with the coronavirus, it's going to be just as destructive and even more destructive. So we need the truth. Fortunately, Dr. Fauci, head of infectious diseases, and the coordinator for Corona, Dr. Birx, have been very, very forthright. And you will have seen the press conference yesterday's when they are suggesting that the death rate could be at least as high as 250,000 Americans. I know that's very, very grim news, but we need the facts, we need the truth, and this cannot be papered over if we're going to get through with a minimum of damage and death.
Well, the president did say, and it was at the top of the news today, and I have it here. He finally said, expect a rough 2 weeks. This is his quote. This is going to be a rough 2 weeks. As a nation, we face a difficult few weeks as we approach the really important day. Although he always throws this in when we will see things get better, but that as many as 250 people, 1,000 people may die. But just to be fair to the president, and if you would include this in as you go further, any president has to, and he may not be good at this, show some calm, show some optimism, and he has at some point to try and get people to look forward, and he just may not do it well. What does he need to do better to strike that balance?
He can't. I think it is emotionally, psychologically, personality-driven, impossible. The model is Andrew Cuomo, your governor.
Mm-hmm.
What Cuomo is doing is nothing short of brilliant. He's been calm. He has been lucid. He has been direct. He's been telling you exactly what needs to be told in a way that is both confident and shows competence, but also is not withholding anything. And in this particular case, because Donald Trump, if nothing else, is a master salesperson, he could probably sell anything. Mm-hmm. And what he wants to sell is that his administration is doing the very best it can, understandably, but in that regard, he's going to oversell. And so therefore, I do not think he can portray the presidency the way that past presidents have in crisis, whether it was George W. Bush at Twin Towers in New York City after September 11th, or Barack Obama after the many shootings, or Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan after the tragedy of the shuttle.
Right, the Challenger. Sure, Ronald Reagan was brilliant.
Trump is just not capable. Now, this is going to be further politicized because what's going to happen is that the Democrats are going to claim that the president has been responsible for huge numbers of deaths.
That's
already Adam Schiff is looking to start another 9/11 commission. The Republicans are going to say, look, it was because of the impeachment that we're not able to concentrate on Corona, which is all nonsense. And so you're going to politicize this two different ways. and it's just not going to be very, very useful to the debate. But I guarantee you this is going to emerge as part of the political vindictiveness between Republicans and Democrats.
I mean, wouldn't a guy like Adam Schiff, who actually, he took his lumps, but I thought that he was pursuing righteous things, but wouldn't he give away a lot of his credibility by doing that now? Wouldn't, I mean...
Yes, if you're going to do anything, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, just
I think
shut up.
I think it's important to study how did this go wrong and what can we learn for it. But it's got to be done on a bipartisan basis. And when you have somebody who's already been politicized like Adam Schiff, whether he's right or wrong, it just sends off the wrong message.
Yeah, he can't be that guy. Although, you know what I frequently think back to when we talk about bipartisanship is, and I forget it now because it's already right after the 2008 initiation and continuation of our little depression, recession. There was that bipartisan committee that really worked very well, and they came up with all these ideas, and neither side did anything about them. What is it about, have we become so politicized that it's impossible to do anything bipartisan anymore? I mean,
that's the problem, Bob. Look, first of all, your listeners should ask the question, where is our master plan to deal with corona? And who's in charge? Who do I go to? Who's in charge of ventilators in the U.S. government? Who's in charge of masks? Who's in charge of protective equipment? Who is in charge of research and development? Who's dealing with industry? Nobody really seems to know. I'm sure there are some people working it, but I don't see that there's a cogent chain of command or organization. If there is, then the communications are awful. So we need a plan. Second, we're going to need further fiscal stimulus, probably 2 or 3 more bills. And we're also going to need an infrastructure bill. The president is absolutely correct. He's been right in arguing for an infrastructure bill. As you know, I've been making this case since about 2005. So there is an opportunity here to rebuild our infrastructure from internet access, 5G, to roads, to ports, you name it. This needs to be done, and it would be one way of stimulating the economy when this is over. And so I think while we can't get a bill through immediately, I would hope by mid-June there would be sufficient agreement so that we can have an infrastructure bill. But you get politicization. You get people, for example, who see this as an opportunity in Congress to push the Green New Deal. And without being cynical, they can argue that the coronavirus has shown how vulnerable we are, and if we think this is a problem, climate change is going to be even worse. They may be correct. They may be correct in that assessment. But unfortunately, we have one priority right now above all priorities, and that is to stop the spread of this without destroying the economy. And everything must be secondary, no matter how valid. And unless you have discipline, party discipline, and we don't have party discipline anymore, the Republicans do, I guess, because of Trump. The Democrats certainly don't.
No, they
get some degree of party discipline and leadership. Look, when the Speaker of the House of Representatives, number 3 in succession, or in control after the Vice President for the presidency, and the President have not spoken for weeks or months, that is not a healthy sign.
Do you know?
So I think there has to be some meeting between Pelosi and Trump. Something first order of business, because the tip that they have between them is worth absolutely nothing when the country is at risk.
Absolutely.
So somebody's got to stand up and put politics aside. But quite frankly, I think the only real leadership, and I don't want to demean Gavin Newsom of California, some of the governors, Mike DeWine of Ohio, who's doing quite well, but Andrew Cuomo is standing up as somebody who is exerting competent leadership. Out of 320 million people, my gosh, we should have at least more than one politician who can rise to the occasion.
Or at least be willing to rise, not fearing the dread of reprisal. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that we share in backgrounds. Before I came to radio, I was an executive, and you have been a commander of a ship, of a fighting vessel. And this is an observation on my part, but believe me, it's a well-heeled one. We do not regard the science and the discipline required of running things, of managing things. It used to be a great American strength. And I'm going to throw a couple of variables at you and see what omelet you could make out of it. And I know it's like this in every democracy. A president comes in, right or left, Democrat or Republican, and they put people who help them win in charge of agencies. A. B. In these agencies, because of bureaucracy, we have a lot of incompetence that's hard to get rid of, and a lot of good people who care lose hope. Because of different political, whoever wins, I've got to get X numbers of people. We have quotas that we have to worry about. We have unions that we have to worry about. Let's throw that in. Then we have, even this particular administration refers to the needed bureaucracy that runs these things as the enemy, as the deep state. And lastly, America's selfishness has led to where we don't promote people on their ability to manage and do details. We promote people on the basis of what they're good at today. And that gets too much into the weeds. But the example I'll give you, the contrast. In Iraq One, at least I've read this, and you would know infinitely better than I, we won that first war so quickly because of what I like to call the little gray men, the logistics officers, the people that planned it out. If you could do it in an invasion of Iraq, you can do it for contingency planning. My point is, what's broken in America's ability to manage things? And I was long-winded, but I want to throw all those out there because I've always said, and I've said this for 15 years on this microphone, the most important thing done in America, not done well anymore, is middle management. Why not?
Well, I'm going to take exception with you. I don't agree with that. I think that you have many, many companies that are extremely well managed. My brother is he's more than a financial management, but his company is brilliantly managed.
Really?
I'm chairman of a company that's in the infrastructure protection business. We were doing a lot of business with Con Ed to help them prevent exploding manhole covers and keep electrical distribution safe and sound.
Okay.
My company is brilliantly managed.
Okay, what about them? What about government? What about the bureaucracy then? Then why
there's a big difference here.
Well, then let's go there.
There's a vibrancy. Let me finish, Bob. There's a vibrancy in the private sector. Now, obviously, some of the big companies, are not quite as fast on their feet. You can argue that Boeing is an example of a company that's not well managed. It will get well managed. Other people will say that Lockheed Martin, the largest defense company, is extremely well managed. The problem with government is that it is broken for a reason. And the reason it is broken is because the trust and confidence of the people in government since the Vietnam War has now deteriorated to the lowest levels probably since before the revolution. And what's happened is good people just don't want to go into government. You're absolutely right that every administration is going to load it down with loyalists because people work very, very hard for the administration and for a president, so there should be some kind of a reward.
No problem.
But an awful lot of good people refuse to go into government right now. Why? Because, first of all, the personal invasiveness of just going through the security checks, you put your entire life on the line. You've got to divest of everything, so it's probably going to cost a great deal of money for people who are well-heeled. And then you run the risk of being attacked politically for reasons that have nothing to do with you, but because of your party affiliation. So we are discouraging really good people. The places where that has not necessarily affected yet have been the Department of Defense and the military. But I bet if you look at a lot of these other departments where there are a number of really good people, a lot of people have been driven out. The State Department, for example. The State Department is a former shell because nobody wants to work for Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo, who recently the Washington Post called the worst Secretary of State in our history. And while that may not be entirely accurate, it's not too far off the mark. And so what we have done is to demean government, certainly at the federal level. We've made the barriers to people working for the federal government much, much higher. And in politicizing everything, you're either with me or against me. So you're right. It's not a question of my competence. Look at the Director of National Intelligence, Richard Grenell. He has no more reason to be head of national intelligence than he does flying to the moon.
Yeah,
but
that's
he's a loyalist
to
to the president, and this is outrageous, and I'm delighted that the chairman and the co-chairman, or the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, have sent a letter to Grenell saying before he makes any other changes, he better check with that committee. This is a disgrace. This is a disgrace. And it's not just this administration, though I will say that this administration is probably more guilty than most.
Well, I think accepting your, I'm really glad to hear that the corporations have recovered. You know, my last intimacy with them was what led up to 2008, and saw how.
Yeah, well, that was largely in the financial.
Well, okay,
and
but
quite frankly,
go ahead.
look, that look, I don't want to go into the crash, but the crash goes back to Lyndon Johnson and the Fair Family Act,
Yep.
in which low-cost housing was being subsidized, and you got into all the mortgage-backed securities. People were making zillions of dollars, and everybody thought that the Shiller Index, meaning that housing prices would always go up, was inevitable. So there are lots of reasons that crisis happened, which are entirely different. But take a look at the way the private sector right now is responding to this crisis.
Well,
now, if the news is right, the drug companies, Battelle in Ohio, these companies are turning around this stuff magically. So don't tell me that they're not well managed.
Well, that's good to hear.
They're doing a terrific job.
Well, that's good to hear.
As far as I know.
That's good to hear, and it brings me to almost the next line on the chart, which those of us who have been in private corporations and understand what good management is, that we don't have it in government when we need it is a crying shame. Now, having said that, I'd like to turn our attention, and again, since you chair a company, as we go forward, it has been my own belief in the private sector that not only will we come out of this okay, but as you well know, there are people already figuring out how to make money out of this when we come back. And that is a real strength that America has that I think that Trump intuitively knows but doesn't articulate it well. Is that fair?
That's correct. You're taking a look, if you read the FT, the Financial Times, there are
Yes,
hedge funds that are trying to raise all sorts of money because there are going to be huge opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunities right now, clearly, Bob, are going to be in the healthcare areas and in the infrastructure areas because those are places that we have to build. Now, when and who, obviously, will take some time. Artificial intelligence. I'm dealing with a company right now that believes they can find a needle in a haystack, namely take all this disaggregated data and put it together and come up with more analysis on what's going on with Corona. Getting it into the government, however, is not easy because everybody is busy.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think that there are going to be huge opportunities, but these are going to be really rough times, and it's probably not going to be just the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's probably going to be 3 or 4 months. And then there's always the chance of the second wave because when things relent and people can go out, the human body, society has not accommodated to this brand new virus.
Mm-hmm.
And that will take a number of years. So I think there could be a blowback. But there is huge opportunity if we have a leadership and if we have a plan.
Absolutely.
And I don't see the plan and the leadership coming out. These presidential press conferences are basically political rallies.
Yeah, the PA
president
rally.
Can't get out of the White House. And, he seems to be doing well because his political standing is going up in terms of approval ratings. But I'm not sure how helpful this is. And you're noting a lot of journalists are not going to any more of these briefings because there's not much news there.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think you've placed us on a track that encourages me, though, which is that I think, as it always has been, the government can help put a safety net there, but at the end of the day, it's going to be private industry that gets us back on our feet.
I agree with you. Now, let me make another point,
Please
which
do.
will sound rather cold-blooded. According to the CDC, every day about 8,000 Americans normally die. I shouldn't say normally, die.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Of everything. Cancer, gunshots, drug overdoses, old age, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big figure. And what happens if the projections are right on April 15th or 16th, 2,500 Americans die, that will be a spike of about 30%.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that lots of Americans, and this will make me sound a lot like Donald Trump, I'm afraid, lots of Americans die every single day of other causes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how many of those people would have died irrespective, or how many of those deaths were directly related to Corona needs to be seen. But the numbers are seemingly huge to people. But on the other hand, we have a population of 330 million people. 330 million people. And so while the numbers are large, and they're going to be large in proportion of how many people died at Pearl Harbor, about 2,500, or September 11th, 3,000, the population of 330 million people, statistically, and if 80% of people are asymptomatic, the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans are going to be okay. Now, it's not okay. It's not okay if you're one of them. But obviously, in the larger scheme, we will be okay. What needs to be reassured, let me finish, Bob. What needs to be reassured is that if you take simple precautions, if you wash your hands regularly and don't touch your face,
mm-hmm.
and stay 3, 6, 10 feet away from people, the chances are infinitesimal that you're going to get coronavirus. Those are medical facts. We hope so far that somehow this disease has not metastasized into something where it's now floating everywhere. But if we know enough about the disease to know how it's contracted, the vast majority of Americans are not going to be affected. And of those who do get the disease, probably more than 80% will have minimum symptoms, and another 10 or 15% will recover. So this is not the Black Death where half the population of the world is going to die. This is not, if you remember that great movie with Gregory Peck and Ava Gardner.
Oh, yes.
Ava Gardner, called On the Beach.
Yes.
Which was the 1960 nuclear war, and the only continent left is Australia, and the cloud is coming down to kill everybody. This is not on the beach. But you need sober, competent leadership to make that point. Andrew Cuomo is doing that. Donald Trump has not yet been able to follow that lead.
Harlan Ullman just did as we passed through 9:30. Your point, and you said it was cold-blooded. It isn't, it's not, because the context, we had some people call in yesterday saying, you got to give us more of the good news. I said, the good news is in the context, which you just articulated. Now, late last night, I saw a piece by realclearpolitics.com. It was a lot more cold-blooded than what you articulated, but there was a bit of truth in there that really rung out to me. That because we haven't tested everyone, we really don't know the real percentage of people who will get sick and die and how that holds up, say, to the common flu.
That's correct.
It may even be less than what we think.
That's correct.
So I hear you fully. And I'm really glad you said that, because a lot of people look forward to you coming on and have a lot of respect for what you say. And believe it or not, as cold-blooded as it sounds, it actually will give a lot of people solace. I wanted to move on to something I've read today and you spoke about briefly last week. There is a destroyer or a battleship, I don't know which, that 200 of the sailors need to be quarantined because they've got the bug. They gave 900 tests. I guess there were 900 people on the vessel. 200 came up positive. Does that surprise you? How do we keep our fleet healthy?
Well, first of all, the example you should use is USS Teddy Roosevelt. That's in Guam. The captain, Captain Crozier, sent a letter back to the Pentagon, which leaked, saying, help. I have great respect for that captain. He had the intellectual courage and fortitude to tell the truth. Now, Teddy Roosevelt is anchored. His hope is now at Guam. They're trying to offload the bulk of the crew, keeping a skeleton crew on board so they can fumigate the ship. Where you put some 4,000 sailors is not going to be easy. You might have to put them in tents, so forth. But there are 2 points. One, and this applies not just to the Navy, but think about Air Force missile crews in their silos, submariners who are at sea with a deterrent force, or people in Korea in battalions and brigades and fighter squadrons. This applies across the military. If we had to fight, we can fight. And you just have to say, okay, that coronavirus is just something we have to accept. At Guadalcanal, you remember the movies with John Wayne?
Oh, God, yes.
The Marines went ashore in August of 1942. Despite the movies, fortunately, only 1,600 Marines died. Actually, over 5,000 sailors died in Iron Bottom Sound. But Marines were infested with malaria, with dysentery, with all these kinds of things, and they just had to fight. And so if there's a war, and think about World War I in 1918, where about 20% of the Army had the Spanish flu, you're just going to have to make do if it's wartime. And so on those grounds, I think everybody understands that. If Roosevelt had to get underway today to get to war, she would get underway, and some portion of the crew would come down with corona. Some people would die, but some people are going to die in battle. And you just have to be hard-nosed about that.
Well, you do.
So if there's a crisis, the military will be prepared. But right now it's peacetime. And so we have to take every single step we can to save and protect the lives of every single sailor, Marine, airman, and soldier that we possibly can. And we're going to do that. But make no mistake, if something happened tomorrow and, say, Teddy Roosevelt had to get underway, she would get underway and she would fight.
Of
and
course.
She would fight effectively.
Now, I read something this morning, I'm sure you know it in greater detail, or one of my guests actually mentioned it, that for some of the subcrews that go out for 3 or maybe 6 months, what they've been doing is having them sequester for 2 weeks before they go out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that makes a lot of sense. Apropos of this, I'm sure you've read about it. I've been anxious to get your opinion. Sweden is one of the few major countries who is not quarantining as such. They're disciplined about washing their hands and everything else.
Yep.
What is your reaction to that?
There hasn't been much. I mean, there's so much news here. Who knows? I mean, the Swedes may be much healthier, and there's also a very interesting issue. There's a question. I have cousins who are medical doctors, and the question is, does the amount of infection you have determine the degree of severity of the disease?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you picked up 2 viruses
Mm-hmm.
and you have no symptoms, or supposing you picked up 1,000, will that make a difference? I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that yet, whether one is just as bad as many. And I don't have any information about Sweden, but obviously, if you keep yourself away from other people and you wash your hands frequently and don't touch your face, statistically, the chances of getting the virus are very, 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 very low. And you've got a small, well-disciplined population that's very, very homogeneous.
Well, that's what
And so it could be working in Sweden, but, the population of Sweden is just a few million people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the situation there, and outside of Stockholm, it's a country which is not very, very, very dense in terms of people.
So that does explain it. Harlan Ullman is our guest. I want to ask you about your new book in a moment, but not just yet. I want to go down another path. Again, looking at the military, life goes on underneath the radar of the average person, and even those of us in the news, unless we do our digging. I understand that we're still keeping a lot of pressure on Iran. We still have a lot of ships at sea. Why so much pressure now? What are we hoping to achieve?
Well, unfortunately, the Trump administration about Iran is as irrational as the George W. Bush administration was over Saddam Hussein and non-existent weapons of mass destruction. The notion here is if you keep the great pressure on Iran right now at this time of crisis, there will be a regime change, or the Iranian leadership will be forced to negotiate. And we're making a rather deceitful argument saying, well, they still have access to food and medicine. Well, have access to food and medicine, they got to be able to pay for it. And so when you have financial restrictions on Iran, they can't pay for the food and medicine that may be available. And so I think that the administration has no choice but to remove these sanctions, at least for the time being. Because what you are doing, it seems to me, and we didn't understand this in Iraq when we put all these sanctions on Iraq, and it only meant that Saddam Hussein was more powerful because he controlled all the resources that were coming into the country.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is happening in Iran, that the mullahs, the Grand Ayatollah, and his ruling clerics are the ones who are controlling and giving, or at least distributing, all the necessary food and drugs so that the population is even more dependent upon them. So this whole notion of sanctions is just crazy. It's contradictory. In any event, if this continues, we will have the guaranteed enmity of the Persian people for many lifetimes.
I was going to ask
And
for. I was going to say for a
while
lifetime.
I think this is unlikely. This, to me, would encourage those people who say we want to have a nuclear weapon and we're going to use it against America. And there are going to be some crazies, even though the Ayatollah said it is immoral and against Islam to have a nuclear weapon. My concern is that the Iran mullahs could be pushed in that direction by this short-sighted policy. But look, they canceled the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action as the worst
Mm-hmm.
agreement ever negotiated. The point was Iran did not have a nuclear weapon. Yes or no, is Iran closer to developing a nuclear weapon today than it was when the agreement was in force? That answers the question.
Yeah, it really
This was
does.
an act of geostrategic incompetence, but we're stuck with it. And unfortunately, there are a significant number of Americans who agree with that policy because they see Iran as the great enemy, and they don't realize that even during the height of the Cold War, when the United States and Soviet Union had tens of thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other, and we were enemies, that we were able to reach agreements to prevent that war.
Mm-hmm.
To a lesser degree, the same thing applies in Iran. And the decision to abrogate the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action will go down in history as stupid as the decision to invade Iraq in 2003.
Harlan, how much, when America does this, you know, you've been in the military, so you know this, when the worst things a flyer, a pilot can be is so overly confident and cocky that he gets himself killed unnecessarily. Does America have that a little bit in its DNA, that we just think that we can do these things because we're bigger and tougher than everybody?
I would put it differently. As a very, very famous Harvard professor once said, we in America think that everybody needs to think as we do,
yes,
or to be in need to be brought up to our level of education. After World War II, there was a certain arrogance. There's a certain sense that democracy and liberty and the American way and its values are universal. That is simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
And because we became so dominant after World War II, we actually believed that the American way of life was universal. And we said, look, this finally worked in Japan and Germany. Look what happened after World War II. We've democratized them. That democracy is the key to the future. And unfortunately, we have not learned the lesson yet that that simply is not true. For example, in Afghanistan, we believe that democracy and the vote and majority rule is important. That is nonsense.
You know,
for centuries,
I got to interrupt
for millennia, the Afghans believe in consensus. There is a big difference between consensus and democracy.
No kidding.
We don't understand that.
You know what's just funny? Maybe we've been talking too long, but my next question for you was apropos of this. It's my job to do the segues, Harlan Owen. Well done. When I think about, even if we got our way in Iran, I love democracy and our form of democracy when it works here. But over the decades that I follow politics, I've lost faith in the ability, or the belief in the ability, that it can be imposed in these places. Even if we get rid of the mullahs, is democracy going to work there? Does it really work anywhere in these kinds of countries?
It really depends on the personality of the country.
Mm-hmm.
My new book, which you're going to ask about, called Westphalia II, A World America Thinks It Understands and We Really Don't.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into this, and the thesis is very, very simple. For nearly 400 years, the Westphalia system, going back to 1648 and the Treaty of Westphalia that ended the 30 Years' War, made the international political system state-centric, and states were the only entities that had the authority to use force and to set sovereignty. Well, that world is gone. It ended September 11th, but it ended actually with the end of the Cold War for two reasons. One, because anybody can play. Osama bin Laden is one, but you have got non-state actors, even though Gavrila Princip precipitated World War I by killing the Archduke in June of 1914. Today, because globalization and the diffusion of power have created all these vulnerabilities and fragilities, the issue right now is not the threat necessarily of war, and not mass assured destruction, but rather massive assured disruption. Disruption is the issue.
Well said.
It's across the board. These are acts. It's either acts of man or nature. That's what we have to understand. And coronavirus is beginning to show us that it's going to be disruption.
Well,
climate change will be hugely disruptive. So will cyber. And so that's the thesis of the book. And the point I'm making is that looking at various countries, I do a bit on China and on Russia and on Turkey and on other contenders. And the fact is the personality of the country determines its political system. There's no way that Russia could ever become a democracy, ever. The public doesn't want it. It wants, obviously, its freedoms to go around doing what it wants. But the notion of Russia and Russians, which goes back over 1,000 years, is entirely different. Similarly in China.
Yeah.
China wants to have a hierarchical system with control, but in which the average Chinese can go about doing whatever he or she wants, provided they don't upset the political order.
Apropos of that,
and so you're not going to change that kind of system. And to try to impose that, we should have learned that in Vietnam. We didn't. We should have learned that in Afghanistan. We didn't. And we should have learned that in Iraq, and we haven't.
You know, it was interesting. A couple of years ago, when we started the tariff war with China, a lot of our journalists out there want to talk to the average Chinese successful middle class, upper middle class professional. and they like their system. They preferred. I mean, some journalists don't, but they liked it. They said we have more order. We don't have the chaos that you have. Very interesting reaction.
Bob, let me tell you a funny sea story.
Go ahead, sir.
When I used to be very close to the Chinese, and this is about 15 years ago. The head Chinese spy, whose wife was a very, very senior person in mainland China. She was the deputy attorney general in essence. He and I were very, very, very friendly, and I took him to lunch. He was going back, and I said, Chung, you're going back to China now. You had all the perks here in Washington. You've got a car and driver. You have a huge house in McLean. You've got an expense budget. You can see the whole world. What do you think about going back to China, which is not necessarily as advanced? And without batting an eye, he said, no, I'm going back to a truly civilized country. And he meant it.
He did,
and
because
we in America could never understand that. You know, we'd say, well, he's brainwashed. He doesn't understand. No, cultures are different.
Yep.
Cultures are different. And unless you respect and understand the culture, I mean, the thesis of many of my books has been our knowledge and understanding of the world and other cultures has been dismal. And that's why we fail.
And it's so unfortunate, too. 944, we're going to talk a little bit more about the book, but you've certainly laid out some of the theses, and I want to consolidate some of that going forward. But I had another issue that is probably rich for you. Of course, Netanyahu is off the hook for a while because of the coronavirus. It looks like he will probably stay in power because of it as well. But there's an issue going on there with the three issues with the coronavirus. One, and we're not getting a lot of information, the people in the Gaza are probably going to die en masse. The people in the West Bank, it's a little less complicated. And reports are now coming out of Israel that they're having a hard time keeping Orthodox Jews from having groups, and people are going to die there as well. How does Israel come to grips with all these three different dynamics?
Oh, well, without making too much light of this could be a biblical conundrum.
Well, it really
Israeli
is.
Government.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a biblical proportions, that the nature of their society is such that they have no alternative. That what are you going to do in Gaza? I mean, I have been to Gaza. It is a nightmare, and it has been a nightmare for decades.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if a huge proportion of the Palestinians die or are infected? West Bank is more complicated because you've got a lot of Israelis there. And what happens if you have the most Orthodox Jews who just disregard government? Are you going to arrest them? Violation of their religion? I mean, this is a huge, huge strain of the fundamental vulnerabilities and fragilities of that society. And that's what happens when you have a crisis. The tensions and contradictions of that society are thoroughly exposed, and how the society deals with those contradictions becomes critical to the outcome. And we have that in America. To what degree do we have to save people and deal with the virus, and to what degree can we destroy the economy? Those are two racing in opposite direction forces which need to be reconciled. That's one of the tensions that we face here. Or you saw it even in the South, where this idiot pastor was arrested, fortunately, because he was denying the truth. Or you have whatever it was, the university, Liberty University, is going back to school.
Don't even get me started. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure some of your callers will take offense at what I'm saying.
No, I go to these places. No, I go to these places all the time. It's one of my. I am a real advocate of Christopher Hitchens when it comes to how religion affects politics, etc. As we pass through 947 again, our guest is so well informed, Harlan Ullman. But now the West Bank, I used to have a regular correspondent on from the Middle East, and she explained, I'm sure you've done this, but for people who live here in Westchester, she explained it as when you drive up the Hutch and you go through the different cities, you said when you drive up, there's a main road, when you drive up the West Bank, this is Palestinian, this is... You can't go there, you can go here. This is a settlement, and it's all, I guess it's all homogenized. What's it like? What's the West Bank like?
That's a pretty good description. I have not been there in a number of years, but I can only say that's probably it's a series of gated communities, to put it simply.
Wow.
And some of the gated communities are places where nobody wants to live, namely where the Arabs or Palestinians live, or the Jordanians, who are part of the West Bank population, the Arab population.
It's
always been a very unhealthy, well, not always, but it's an unhealthy situation, and by increasing the numbers of settlements, that it's made a bad situation worse.
I've got to go to a hard place here. At what point now? Israel is is of course a democracy, and but it's also a Jewish state.
If you're Jewish,
yes, right, and it's a haven for the diaspora if they choose to go there. But it also is a country that is defined in many ways by its religion, and its hard right is intractable. Eventually,
yeah,
how are they ever going to deal with their hard right? You can't deal with it here. How are they going to deal with their hard right? And our hard left is no better. But how are they going to deal with that eventually? Because
I have no idea.
You can't have religion rule the roost at the end of the day. It's killing the planet.
I could not agree with you more. But you have the same problem in Iran with the mullahs.
Yeah, that's where exactly where I was going.
And you have the problem here, Bob, is that we talk about the plague, but probably more people in history have been killed over religious wars than anything else.
There's no question about it. Now, for my grand old question here, and then I want to hear a little bit more about the book. When we look at the tensions here, the tensions in Israel, the tensions in India, the tensions in the UK, and some other democracies, we live in this era, you and I, and those listening. But will one day the world look back on democracy as having failed? And is it failing?
That's a very, very interesting question. And obviously, it's going to be impossible to answer that. I hope that 1,000 years from now or 500 years from now, people will understand that democracy has limitations. And that is the smartest lesson that can be learned. Right now, the best guess, and this is a guess, is that the countries that will emerge most strongly, or the strongest countries to emerge, will be China and Russia, neither of which are democracies. Now, we really don't know the extent of the coronavirus in either of those countries, and it could be worse, and they could be simply covering up everything and lying about it. I don't know. But if what's coming out is correct, that China is beginning its manufacturing basis, and it will become an alternative model that will be very attractive to large numbers of countries in Europe or in Asia, for example.
Vietnam follows
what happens in the United States, how we come out of this, we will come out, if we come out as well as we should, then we will be a competing model. But those two models should coexist together. And the lesson that we have to learn is that democracy is terrific for us, but this whole notion of imposing democracy elsewhere has been a failed mission since Woodrow Wilson's time. We were fortunate in World War II that we were fighting two enemies that were so dangerous and so vicious that we were fighting, in this case, for good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, good and evil have become more difficult to distinguish. I make the point again about Vietnam. I make the point about Afghanistan and Iraq. And so I hope that in the future we will not be so interested in imposing human rights everywhere and democracy everywhere, because people have got to live according to their cultures and their political systems. And imposing a different system from without, except in certain circumstances, which I don't think are going to be repeated, such as World War II, this is something that is not our value added, and I hope we learn that.
My guest again, Harlan Ullman, internationally renowned national security expert, teaches at military colleges and so forth, so much, writing books, and I wanted to return to this. Oh, and by the way, your conversation with that Chinese intelligence guy is still bouncing around my spacious little brain. Wow. Your book, and I'd like to just put it a little bit, just narrow it so people can look forward to it. Again, I know your publisher may change the title or give it a subtitle, but what are you planning on calling it, and give us the essence of it?
Well, I just did. It's called Westphalia 2,
mm-hmm. I want
a world we think we understand and really don't. And it makes the argument that this world is far different because it's much more complicated. As Americans, we have less influence. And the sizing or forcing factor is going to be the need to deal with disruption, not just corona, but disruption of everything man-made or of nature, climate change. And to do that, we need to be thinking through our future national security context in far different ways. For example, NATO. NATO is going to be profoundly affected by this one way or the other, if only because countries are not going to have the resources to be able to afford to put to defense. Our military is going to be profoundly different because we're not going to have the budgets and the money to be able to maintain the kind of force we have.
Mm-hmm.
Further, there are going to be all sorts of different needs to protect the nation, not just from military threats. So the whole basis for our security is going to be far different because of what's happening on Corona and because of all the fragilities and vulnerabilities that have been created in terms of an interdependent world. And to think that we can be autarkical, and that is that we are self-sufficient, is nonsense. David Ricardo and the notion of value is always going to, comparative advantage is always going to maintain. So you're not going to be able to build a society that is walled off from the rest of the world. It just simply cannot happen. And so we need to begin to think right now about what this future looks like and how we begin to put in place the intellectual structures to be able to deal with that. That is the whole purpose of the book. And the first part is how the world has changed. The second part is how the United States has changed. And the third part is called What We Do About It.
Wow.
And to take this to an even further point, I've given evidence to the House of Commons Select Committee on Defense in the UK. They're in the middle of a huge national security review, and tomorrow I will testify before the House of Commons Defense Committee on Skype. Sadly, I can't go to Britain, but this is exactly the points I'm going to make with the Brits, that they need to begin thinking through about an entirely different future, even whether or not Brexit should be maintained. And parts of this thinking process have to include continuity of government. I mean, for example, the Congress is out of session, and how do you bring it back in session when social distancing is required, or when, say, half the members or some huge percentage, so you can't get a quorum, are quarantined? What do you do when at number 10, in number 10, the Prime Minister's residence, is a warren of little rooms where people think about a ship.
It's a
Think about a
townhouse.
warship.
Yeah.
Think about a warship. That's number 10. And so you have the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. Fortunately, they don't seem to have really the most severe form of these. What about continuity of government? What are we thinking about that when you just can't convene people in public places? How do you change that? Do we have to think about changing the Constitution to make up for these great disruptions that are going to be, I think, even more frequent? What people will not realize is that the Congress Commission just came out with a report on cyber, in which it just lays out that this is an existential threat.
That's the second time you've done that today, that you've taken a note of mine, and I may as well rip it up. I was just going to ask you about cyber in this context. But
so you have all these potential disruptions, Bob, not just corona, but climate change, which could be the largest.
Go back a second. Go back a second, if I may, because you mentioned cyber, and the reason I was going to bring it up, should we align the health organization that should deal with these kinds of pandemics? Should we align them more with the military the way we have cyber? Would it be more Would it be more disciplined?
No,
Would it be
that's
more
the worst
robust?
thing. That's the worst thing we can do.
Okay, tell us
why. It needs
why.
to be civilianized, and you can't militarize cyber because the military has a really tiny role in this.
Okay.
So, look, cyber is everywhere. How do you think? How is everybody computing? The people with computers, it's on the internet.
Got it.
You've got 75% of Americans who are at home. Most of them, I would have thought, have access to the internet. And so how do you communicate? It's through cyber. How are you doing your banking? How are you doing your grocery shopping?
Tell me.
How are you paying your bills? How are you reading your newspapers? So the military has a very, very small role in cyber. It's a very, very critical role, obviously. But cyber has got to be part of an infrastructure project. And along with public health, cyber is going to be at least equally important.
Got it now.
Because you could envisage a future in which the majority of work is being done by teleporting on the internet. People are going to be working at home. So this could be an entirely different world we see in a year, 2 years, or 3 years. And cyber is going to be essential. It is going to be the oxygen and the water of society. And we need to recognize that and take it more seriously.
When do you think we'll see this book? How far away are we?
I don't know.
You're working your butt off,
don't know.
I know. Harlan, you know what? I should apply for a degree somewhere for getting to talk with you each week like this over the years. I know our listeners appreciate it. I could not tell you how much. I can't say enough how much I appreciate your time. Now, do you have another column coming out? Or no? You just finished one, but you'll write a new one.
No, column. I'm not sure. Next week, I'm probably going to talk about the future of NATO. I'm going to get off the Corona business. It's too depressing.
Yes. Well, the future of NATO, well, let's see how happy that keeps you. But we know that is what you do. One more time, remind the people, I want to get it in their heads. You do so much for us. We want to be sure we do something for you. The likely title of the book when it comes out again, please.
Well, it'll be called Westphalia, too, but it's going to be probably, who knows about publishing.
Well, yeah, and then the way they always give. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Christopher Hitchens. I've read most of his books, and he always used to rail about how they always put in the subtitles. I didn't, and.
Well, but my point is that the book that people should read right now is my last book, Anatomy of Failure: Why America Loses Every War It Starts, because that gets into the real problems that we face today, and that. Are inherent in how we dealt not just with wars in the past, but how we're dealing with the coronavirus. And the basic argument there is that a failure of knowledge and understanding has prevented government from working. And the biggest crisis we face is a government that fails to govern, and that's what we have right now.
Well, thank you very much, Harlan Ullman. Please be safe, you and your family.
You too.
Thank you for all your time. Thank you so much. Great job, sir.
Take care, Bob. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Folks, it's like brain food. They're going to have to give me just for listening to this man and getting to talk with him. And you think it's easy to get up? I'll pick up with him. God, my brain is stretched to its meager limits. But I am very grateful. I am grateful for Harlan Ullman. I'm grateful for our guests today. I'm grateful for Anthony's call. I'm grateful that most of us will be healthy and worried about those that are not. Got a dear friend in the hospital who is down with the virus, went from bad to worse. And you won't know him, and I won't use his nickname because I don't want to get personal. But Bob, please get well. We need you on the rink, but also we need you alive and well. Get better, please. My friend Ron, who's stuck in a nursing home, we talk about him all the time. We're going to get him to call in. My best to you as well, and all of you who have family, friends, loved ones who are dealing with this. Keep the faith. Stay strong for them. Enjoy the day. All righty. We want to thank Vince Russo. We want to thank, and the man who started off some of the issues about veterans, Ken Kreitzer. Jake was with us today. Thank you very much, Jake Schaefer. Ivar Hayden, the city councilman. A.J. Woodson, Harlan Ullman. And folks, please be careful out there, but also try and patronize our businesses as best you can. Help them out. Remember the restaurants we talked about. And again, a restaurant, shoot me an email. I'll talk about them. Tell us who your favorite restaurant is. But they have to be delivering, and they have to be taking orders so that you can pick them up. You email me at bob@radiowestchester.com, and I will give them free plugs. Help them out. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and a lot of us are going to lose our dreams. Okay, we want to thank United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.org. Aging Issues Management, commanded by Joe Sorrell. He calls me almost every day. Make sure we're okay. We hope his business is okay, too. If you need information about your future and how to manage money during these times, Aging Issues Management. Go on their website, the law firm of Pena and Kahn. Pluginvirtualreality.com. And again, think of those wonderful burgers at the Beachmont Tavern. I'm Bob Marrone. Thank you for listening. Tomorrow, you got some interesting people to look forward to. We're going to talk with John Bailey. We're going to talk with Vince, and of course, Andy Spano. Always a lot of fun. And Allison Lake runs an organization that is dedicated to children. How are we helping children? How are we keeping them safe? How are we educating them? What are we doing for health care? We'll talk about all of that tomorrow right here on Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day. It's sunny out. This is the day to go jogging or bike riding. Keep your distance. Sitting on a bench with a sandwich, or if you're like me and you like to skate, get those skates on and find a place. You won't be able to ice skate, but get your rollerblades out, your roller skates. We call them quads today. Get out, go skate someplace, especially those abandoned basketball courts. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.